Yeah, I'm good to go. Testing. Oh, I can hear myself good. Yeah.
Make sure I had a little bit. Something funny happened with that author I was talking to you about. As a matter of fact, I don't know. This is supposed to all be under the table.
Sure.
I have not networked all the cables.
You just moved in.
I'm still using this mixer and not this one.
Okay, yeah, the little one.
So this thing here got drug up all the way. This will sound funny for a second. And I was like, and we didn't wear the headphones, so I wasn't charting that it was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to do some post editing and remove essentially all of that. And yeah. I think we're good now.
Audio's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. And like, I'm still like, look at all the audio stuff in here. I've got to figure out how to, my buddy's come by tomorrow, Dylan. He's been on the show once, but I hope we podcast tomorrow, but we're going to spend time trying to hook this into everything. Right. And I might even, I don't know, I might make a way to like, for this to sit like in a slot over there where that chair is. I don't know. I hadn't figured it out yet. This mixer is insane. I was messing with it earlier and I was like, how am I going to figure out how to use it?
Yeah, for a few years, I actually ran live audio equipment with mixers, digital EQs, all kinds of stuff, and I loved it. I learned the theory from a guy who learned quite a bit himself. I read the manuals and everything, and I love the theory behind.
Up there is like I've been watching YouTube videos. I gotta admit, that's how I learn, man. Once I started switching on Audible, I went from like 2 or 3 books a year. Now I'm on 53.
Wow.
Now I set a goal to do 100 books, but like it's surely the fact that it's the audio books.
Yes.
Like it is so just next level, man. I mean, I'm listening to a book 2-3 hours a day, at least. When I wake up, when I exercise. And then usually when I'm driving. So I'll drive to Morrilton a couple of times a week or 5 times a week sometimes in the car, hour there or an hour there and back. You know, it's 30 minutes each way.
That's exactly what I do. Many years ago, I worked for a landscaping company for a while. Yeah. And when I rode the mower, I would listen to audiobooks.
I had a buddy of mine who's, I was just talking to him the other day, and 2 buddies of mine own a lawn mowing company together. And he was like, oh, dude, I'm cranking them out. But he was saying he was behind me, and I was like, come on, man. I'm not even on the mower. But, yeah. So, Brock Boozer.
That's
on the show. What a cool name. I knew it was something like is that a French?
No, it's actually interesting. I haven't done the research myself, but my grandmother on my father's side supposedly did, and this is what I was told. As far as they could trace it back, there was a guy moved over here from Switzerland, and he came from a town called Bus, B-U-S.
Okay.
Small little dot, like not existent anymore, I don't think. But when he came over, they called him John of Bucer, and somehow along the way that got transferred to B-O-O-Z-E-R instead of B-U-S-E-R.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder when it moves like from a pronunciation to a spelling difference. Like you hear the story like on those stories of people migrating here, like Ellis Island, stuff like that. But I've heard stories like what you just said many times. Anytime I hear a name that I'm like, don't see regularly, right. I'm fascinated by just the linguistics of it. I'm like, okay. I just saw somebody arguing on a post earlier. It's actually the artist that works for Tool or does all their artwork.
Oh, neat.
But he was talking about consciousness, and he said the number one thing that he thinks has moved human consciousness forward is language.
That makes sense.
And I was like, okay. And he's like, there was a time when there was no language, according to, what theories you survey.
Sure.
But, and he's like, so we evolved from that. And he was breaking down a lot of cool stuff. I was like, this post is heady. But this dude, ironically, has this church that he built, and I want to say it's in New York, but it's like New Age, I guess you could. I don't even know. Like,
it's not like evangelical Christian.
No.
Okay.
They're like, man. I wish. Where did I set my phone? We'll fuck about that later. But It's
put mine on
it's
silent.
wild. It's called. I keep showing it to people. I can't remember the name of the church. Duncan Trussell, who is on Joe Rogan's podcast a
seen
lot,
him.
had Alex Gray on his podcast, and they were talking about crazy shit. I was watching a Tool concert live on YouTube the other day,
Okay.
and Alex Gray was like sitting on his knees on the side of the stage watching Tool play. And he's done a lot of their artwork, but he is into this crazy narrative of like spirituality, human consciousness, our experience, like DMT land shit, you know?
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Out there.
Yeah. So, which everything's on a spectrum. I don't even know what you call that, but it's not like evangelical Christian, you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Which we're going to talk about some of that. Like, what a great time to sit down and talk about this. Did you watch the show on, which not to associate with what we're going to talk about anyway with this really, but did you watch Waco on Netflix?
No, I have not.
Pretty wild. I knew about it, but that got me down the rabbit hole, right? Like, I knew the story of what happened, but I didn't know any of the particulars. Mm-hmm. You hear it and you're like, yeah, it's kind of, you kind of hear the side of it, like, should we really be storming that compound? And then like I heard kind of all sides of the narrative, but I didn't know any of the particulars about the people inside. Nothing. The militarization of the police that's going on. Like, nothing did I really cue in as in depth as, like, I've started watching a couple of documentaries on it. But so, like, some of your friends would say, like, you were a member of a cult. Is that a true statement? Would you justify, like, would you say that? Or were you like, remember this really strict sect of Protestant Christianity?
No, I would say it's a cult for sure.
Okay.
In fact, what's quite funny is while I was in the cult, I used to call it a cult. Even before I fully came out of it and was realizing that it was wrong because of how the world defines a cult, I recognized it as a cult. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like, there's all different ways you can define a cult, but like probably one of the most simple ones is, people who believe they have the only true knowledge. Nobody else gets it, right? So you have to be in there and you have to be part of the cult. Nobody else is going to get whatever the cult is going to receive. And that's what it was from the start. So I wasn't proud of that, and nobody else called it a cult, but I recognized it from the beginning.
But yet you did get more interested. Like at a certain point, like you were exposed on a minor level and you kind of got more involved gradually. How did that process kick off?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want me to start sort of how I got started? From the beginning? Okay. So if I go back from the beginning, I was raised Baptist all the way from a young child. In fact, I used to go to a church just down the street from here.
That's what you're saying. Yeah. If we run down the street and around and then through that parking lot and back, it's a mile.
Yeah, it's great. Missionary Baptist. Yeah. A Victory Missionary Baptist. I don't know if they changed the name.
I think that's the same. Yeah.
Yeah. I was raised as a Baptist, and probably in my very early teens, like right turning 12, 13, I actually started to really believe a lot of the things they teach, and I was really interested. So at about 14 years old, I started reading the Bible a little bit more than the average person, and I started seeing some discrepancies, particularly with the Baptists. I don't think all Baptists believe this, but the vast majority do. They believe in once saved, always saved, something they pull from Romans. But the book of John talks about faith without works is dead, and that shocked me. And you can go more into the details of it, but it sort of goes against each other. And I asked my youth pastor at the time about it, and he couldn't really explain it. But I was raised to be to respect authority and to understand that people know more than you do.
The first time I got told I had a problem with authority was in my youth pastor's office at
That's
church.
Hilarious.
I know,
That's
right?
Hilarious.
And then I was like, now I'm like, you're damn right.
I wish I did. I wish I would have had more of a problem with authority, but I didn't. So I took the humble approach, whatever you want to call it, and said, he knows something I don't, and just because he can't explain it.
When you're 14 or something,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. So, but that sort of screwed with me because, everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people like to see themselves as being good, right? And I certainly saw that because I was trying, at least, to follow the teachings that I was hearing, where a lot of the other kids around me were not. But struggling with that doctrine and not having an answer sort of led me to believe one thing, right? To believe I'm following God or whatever, and then slowly drift away.
Backslidden Christian.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And so what happened was, if we just fast forward, I married my wife. We moved from Fort Smith to Fayetteville, and about a year after we were married, due to multiple things going on in our lives, I realized I've been married for a year now. I need to act a little bit more like an adult and start addressing certain things. And I started reflecting on my belief in God. And I was just trying to be honest with myself.
Were you still going to Baptist services at the time?
Not Baptist. We were going to they have a generic term to call them Bible churches. They don't follow like Baptist or Methodist.
Non-denominational.
Sure,
Yeah.
Sure. They called it a Bible, but it's the exact same thing.
I've heard of those, and I went to non-denominational church till I was 8.
Oh, right.
And then went to a Pentecostal church, but it was way more Assembly of God. But I played the guitar I played in the church band is in my office, but the bass I played in the church band is right over there.
Cool.
Yeah, like back when I was in like 10th grade.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I started reflecting, and I said, I need to dive back into that issue again, because I want to stop telling myself I believe in God but not living like it, right? That's what I came to the conclusion. So I need to dive into this doctrinal issue. I needed to decide whatever I believe, and if I really want to say I'm a believer of God and want to follow God, I need to change all my life and go forward that, or I need to go the other path. I was tired of like in my head saying I was something and not being that, right? Yeah.
So, like which religion or anything, I think that's an innately human struggle that like if you're not real with yourself, or if you're fighting an inner battle, like that's going to come out. So sure. Like, it's like, that's not even that much of a religious problem for me, as much as it is like we should all be reflecting on our spirituality like that. In my turn, in however we have to do that. If it's some people, they really get, I know people here that I'm close with, and they really get satisfied by the process of going to church and just receiving, and worshiping and stuff like that. And to me, that's like strange concepts anymore. But it's only, I don't know. I got a background in philosophy, got a minor in philosophy, went to church for 19 years, 20 years, and have really gone down a lot of rabbit holes with that stuff. Mm. Some stuff, I heard you talking about the Assyrians a while back. I like the Assyrians, but I don't like them. I actually have a podcast on them called History's Cruelest People, right? It's kind of a non-xenophobic term, to be politically correct.
There's the cult that I attended has quite a bit of literature on that as well. Yeah,
that's but that's in Civ 1, like I got a whole unit on the Assyrians. Like it's the second test. I go into the Hebrews, Philistines, Phoenicians, Assyrians, and Persians. So kind of that whole like Exodus through Book of Daniel in the Old Testament is where and into Samuel and stuff. It's Daniel come before. I can't even remember anymore, but I always go back to that stuff every time I teach about it, because it's not favorable or balanced for me to not tell the Hebrew side of the siege of Jerusalem, the Assyrian side of the siege of Jerusalem, and the Egyptian side of the siege of Jerusalem, which all three differ. Which, like, that's what you were mentioning, like this. We have this version, and it's actually the true one. Mm-hmm. And the discouragement. I will say I never really been too discouraged by people for looking at other information, but I know in some, for example, and I have a good friend that's a Scientologist.
I heard that on the podcast, and I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, this dude is my bro. Like, I love this guy, right? He's been on the podcast. We just didn't talk about Scientology. But it's like, I think based off what I've heard, but also like why it's kind of like, first question is like, hey, is this a cult? Because I know it's kind of holds the belief of this like Seventh Day. Was it Seventh Day Adventist? Is that the no? Okay.
That's where a lot of people make comparisons because of the Sabbath. Mm. So Seventh Day Adventists, they keep the Sabbath, and they're one of the largest groups that do.
Did this Bible church you were a part of observe that tenet?
No.
Because I know, I mean, I have some friends even that are Sabbath keepers, right? And I know that's a tenet that is a part of Judaism. And so it's not just, but then too, so like you get into what got me interested on this Waco thing was looking into the beliefs of David Koresh. Right. The guy, and he changed his name to that, like, but the Branch Davidians, and them being kind of a spin off of the Seventh Day Adventist, and they hold. So that's one thing I wanted to kind of assess is like, so you could really say then that does, in my mind, sociologically, just in definition terms, put it back in the cult realm. Because Seventh Day Adventist, even though they came around, I think if my dating is correct, in 1850 in the United States, this would have been a post Second Great Awakening. They had two early prophets. One guy had this big vision and prediction, didn't happen, and then they had a female.
Yes,
which
Ellen G. White.
Yeah, which I thought was fascinating. And next time I get into teaching about reform and stuff, because what I did think was interesting is that the organization Seventh Day Adventist started off very meager like that, with just a few dozen and then a few hundred members, but now they have like 700 institutions.
Oh, yes.
So if you get to that big, you're going to have schisms and spinoffs like what we see at the Branch Davidians.
We had a ton in the cult that I was in. I can tell you about that.
Yeah, I was thinking about this too. Like, I saw this when I was in church growing up. Mm-hmm. Like, people, they go to different churches. Mm-hmm. Like, so I wonder how much of that is kind of like human nature of like, people being people and seeing people and being people.
Yeah, I've known people that have moved churches just because they didn't like somebody in the church.
Seen it countless times.
Yeah,
I mean, literally, I can't tell you how many times.
Petty stuff, you know.
Yeah, and that would have been over. I mean, dozens of times over a 10-year period. Mm-hmm. Like literally, the church split a couple of times. And I've seen that as a reoccurrent theme. But I was just thinking about that the other day because my parents said they were going to a different church, and I was like, damn, really? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but which was kind of weird for me to see because I like two churches my whole childhood, and I felt like leaving the first church even though I was 8. I was like, wow. Yeah, I get it. I get why we're doing that. It was just, and then the one we went to, like, it was kind of like, hey, can we leave this one too? Because it's kind of the same stuff going on here,
Mm-hmm.
But a friend of mine, Jesse Weiss, he was on the podcast just recently. We broke down his documentary, Natty Parks. It's filmed a documentary on his iPhone of going to all these national parks. Carlsbad. But he has this example, and this is from sociology. You go cult, sect, religion, right? But think about that. Like, I've been thinking about that being going an opposite way. So
yes, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Right.
Religion, sect, cult.
When you think about, like, because that's why I wanted to clarify the cult idea, is because when I think Seventh-day Adventist and when I was researching, it was like it was basically saying a sect of Protestant Christianity, mm-hmm. which is like a part of the overall religion. And then it was like they differ from Baptist on these tenets. They differ from here on these tenets. But really, I mean, it's like any podcast I do, it gets me going. I'm like, oh, what are we going to talk about? But so did this church you became involved with, not to skip ahead, but did they have like an official title, or was it
what it's called? The name is called the Restored Church of God, and it's a splinter. What happened was where it really started was with a man called Herbert W. Armstrong in the 20s, 30s, and it started with the Radio Church of God, but when it became the most popular name, when it grew its biggest, it was called the Worldwide Church of God. They had something, I think, in the neighborhood of like 80,000 members worldwide. Might have been more than that.
It blew my mind the number of Seventh-day Adventists there are worldwide.
Oh, there's
like 14 million or something like that.
Lot. It might have been more like 200,000 worldwide, but regardless, it's not close to Seventh-day Adventists. And that was when it was worldwide. And then when Herbert W. Armstrong died, it splintered off into literally thousands of groups.
Wow.
Most of them are tiny. There's a few large ones.
Okay.
Large being like 10 to 15,000.
Did you see the splinter? Like, I don't know 100% about the Branch Davidians, mm-hmm. like what their key schism was, other than that guy's like, I got the interpretation here, and that fascinated some people. That his interpretation of the seven seals and stuff. But that's something I got to learn more about, because I'm like, why did they kind of schism off away from Seventh Day Adventist? Is my interest.
Probably prophecy. He saw some new things that they weren't doing right. And the Seventh Day Adventists, that's how most of these splinters are. They see things that this group isn't keeping that we should keep.
Which, so it almost just seems to me like, are you familiar with Sam Harris?
I've heard the name. I've seen him briefly on a podcast.
He's been on Joe's several times.
He's a philosopher.
He's a philosopher, but he's also an atheist. He debated Jordan Peterson in a series of debates across the UK, which is really good to listen to.
Yeah, but it's interesting because Jordan Peterson isn't he says he's religious, but he's not actually like a belief in God, like Jesus Christ. I don't believe, right?
I think he does. I think he is a more of a Protestant leaning Christian, but he was arguing against atheism with Sam Harris, but they were actually more getting into the concept of moral relativism, right? Like whether or not truth is subjective or morals are subjective and things like that, which I thought was fascinating. But Sam Harris did this thing where, and you can see a visual graphic, and it's like a long, like imagine like this rectangle here. And it's like all the books of the Bible, the Old Testament, New Testament. And then it's like you said this, like when we first met, you were like, well, and you mentioned this thing, you're like, well, I started noticing these differences in interpretation. This David Koresh dude had memorized the whole Bible by the time he was like 14 years old or something. But Sam Harris has got to get this big coalition of people to do what you said. You see here in the book of 2 Samuel, you see here in the book of John, those directly contradict each other. But the number of lines that dude came up with, that Sam Harris came up with that, right? Or he put together the project and the people, and he was the brainchild behind it. That blew me away. Because, I mean, and then there's going to be differences between the Old and New Testament. It makes sense.
Sure.
I'm like when I first really pieced it together, I'm like, how do the Jews feel about this, that you guys are using this? But then he also does Old Testament contradictions, New Testament to New Testament contradictions across, which I have not gone that deep at all. So it's fascinating for me to talk. The only thing I've done is gone through the Gospels, just because life of Jesus type stuff for my class, which I think the different hypotheses on, okay, well, there's this other document we don't know about out there. The cube, I think it's called the cube hypothesis. Have you heard about that?
Not that hypothesis.
There's I think it's without my notes, but the book of Mark has all of these verses in it that aren't in any of the other Gospels. Oh, yes. But all the other Gospels share almost some instances 600 of the same verses.
Exactly, yes.
But then it's so where's that source material? That's some German scholar was like, there's another document and we lost it. Or someone has it. The Vatican or whatever. Somebody has it, but we don't. And this is how this book was constructed off this source material and these other Gospels, or vice versa, right? So I'm like, oh, man. But that stuff fascinates me, right? I like going through that. I love that. It's history. It's history, right? But anyway, so continue. What were we? I got kind of sidetracked.
No, that's great. No, do you want me to go? I guess how I got into the Restored Church.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So you said you'd moved. You're going through this kind of inner. Yep. You're going through what we all go through, dude. You're asking that question.
Yes.
The inherent one that we all have, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? Why am I here? Do I have a purpose? And that's natural. So that's where you're at. You're married. You moved to Fayetteville.
Yep.
All right.
So it's not too much longer from there how I got into the Restored Church of God, the cult. I would just call it RCG from now on, because that's what they called it for the longest time, until they finally said, no, we don't want to go by abbreviations anymore. Anyway. So I started studying Once Saved, Always Saved Again. And I came upon a website that was very poorly written, but I decided to read it anyway. And it had a bunch of prophecy stuff on it that I was like, But what was interesting was it didn't have a link to any affiliation whatsoever. There was not an about page, nothing. It was just a website that had doctrines. That's it. So I saw something about the Sabbath, and at that time, I hadn't studied the Bible that much, but I was starting to. And I was like, I didn't know what the Sabbath was. I didn't even know what the word
Really?
was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I was like, let me read this. And even though it looked like a crazy webpage and everything, I opened my Bible and I read what it was saying, and I read my Bible and I studied some more and I read some other websites, and I was like, it convinced me. It convinced me that if I was going to be a Christian, I need to keep the Sabbath. And I was like, this is crazy. So I showed my wife, and she said, wow. And then she thought she had some objections. She went to some stuff in the New Testament, and I showed her that it doesn't really say what people had told her it said. Specifically Paul, talking about there remains a Sabbath rest. That's where a lot of stuff gets twisted. But anyhow, I read some more since I got hooked on the Sabbath from that website. I was like, who is this? Who puts this here? So I read some of the prophecy stuff they have, which I wasn't really buying. But I read enough to figure out that it was very likely a Seventh-day Adventist propaganda. Like somebody put it out there particularly to do just what I did. If you get hooked enough, you'll read enough, you'll search enough, and you'll say, who has these doctrines? And you'll find who. So I can't say 100%, but I'm like 99% sure it was probably a Seventh-day Adventist person who put that website up. So I looked into them, and just like you said, thankfully, I very quickly stumbled upon Ellen G. White, who is big in Seventh-day Adventists, and she's been proven multiple times. You know, she's long gone, but she had many false prophecies. So that right there turned me off of Seventh-day Adventism.
Okay. So in the big controversy, I forget his name because I just was exposed to it for the first time today. The guy that was the prophet before her, the founder, he had one failed prophecy, and they were like, we're done with you, dude. Like it really fragmented. But I didn't get into, I read a little bit about her, but not into any of her, like they really turned on her because of that, you know? But, so when you say Sabbath, for people that, like, I know some people that keep the Sabbath, and I know about it. And then too, I'm all conflicted about it too, because I'm like, the argument is on Saturday or Sunday, right? Amongst these groups we're talking about, and I guess you could say mainstream Protestant Christianity.
Right.
I've always wondered, it's like, wouldn't it be on a different day every year?
Well, the 7-day week cycle, you know, you got 7 days a week. Does that ever really change?
I mean, no, the days of the week don't, which are named after pagan deities.
Exactly. That was a big problem we had when we were in the cult, and they were just like, we just have to accept it, even though we were against everything like that.
Yeah, man, I remember when I found all that out, I was like...
Yeah, it was shocking. It really was.
Yeah. And I feel like so many people don't know that stuff. Like, I've gone down that rabbit hole on like Easter, Christmas trees, like all of you could just call it pagan symbolism. It would be the best way to describe it for me. But then like what you're saying with like, okay, maybe this was a Seventh-day Adventist fishing in Protestant Christianity for new members. As I understand it, a lot of our religious symbolism and holidays and things you see like that were an effort of Protestant Christianity to bring in non-believers. Sure,
yeah. The Catholics were famous for that, right? They took in so many different religions and adopted their practices, and that's why they have all these, to evangelical Christians, the Catholics' rites and all that kind of stuff looks very foreign because it's merged with a lot of paganism.
Yeah. And well, I guess if you don't do the things that, and you've gone down, you have more empirical experience than I do here. Like literally, like I'm in passing now. I did go to school go to church for 19 years, and was very involved. Right, like I'm talking like it's funny. Corey the other day was like, what was it like going to Sunday night church? Because that's like where we met, was in church. I was like, it sucked.
Yep.
Nobody came because she never came. And I was like, but I was there every time.
Yep.
But dude, that's been, we established you're 32, I'm 33. But dude, 19 to 33. And then me, like, I mean, dude, I just picked up a Bible for the first time in several years last year, and actually started like approaching it like a scholar.
Okay.
I'm like, because like I said, like if I'm telling a story in my history class that's in my book, and that story exists in the Bible, I'm going to go tell that story. And then I'm going to say, you see how this story of the siege of Jerusalem is 3 different things? Like, what do you guys think about that? Like, that's how you do history, you know? And they can think whatever they want about it. I don't care. I'm not there to tell them what to think.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you know, that's where I'm getting more, and I rely on talking to people more so than like, I'm going to go read the answer to this,
Right.
or like I've been fascinated with this stuff because some of the greatest people I know, I will say, are Sabbath observers, right? Like one of the nicest dudes I know in my whole life. He has that belief, and I don't know a whole lot about his church. I wouldn't call them cultish. Again, that's why I want to establish, like, because I know, like, dude, even that show Waco makes me like those people, right? But then you get into like unwinding all the cinema and stuff. It's like, dude, did you have sex with that 14-year-old girl, and you have like a dozen kids, and you're trying to get to 24 so they can be these judges? Like,
Wild.
Yeah, I'm like, this dude's a great actor and I like his character, but whoa. And like, I listened to the original, like that 50-minute recording he put out talking about his interpretation of the Seven Seals on national television.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Right. But so like, then like my conclusion though, is that those Branch Davidians, they were a cult, man. They lived in a compound. They had some wild beliefs, right? What were things about what you said, RDC?
RCG. Restored Church of God, and it's called that because when the Worldwide Church of God split up, they were saying they were restoring the teachings that the Worldwide Church of God held up.
Okay.
Because most of the other, what I've been told, and I've looked into some of the other splinters, but I can't say this holds true for all of them because there's literally like thousands. But most of the bigger ones, they tweaked a few teachings here and there and said, no, we don't do this. No, we don't. Some of them changed a lot of teachings. So that was the whole idea behind the Restored Church of God, was they're holding fast to the truth that was taught through the Worldwide Church of God.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Their view is better than their view.
Exactly.
So you found this blog. You're talking with your wife about it. What happens next? Like, at what point do you decide, do you reach out to these people? How do you get involved?
Yeah. So one thing I'd like to say about the Sabbath, just real quick.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I would like to.
Clarify, man. Educate.
I don't think the people that say Sundays on the Sabbath have a leg to stand on. Now, I don't keep it anymore or anything like that. And I don't care what day you keep it on. But if you're going off of a biblical basis,
I agree.
There's not a leg to stand on. There's so many proofs that it's Saturday. I mean, numerous. And I mean, I can give you some weak ones, and then we could talk forever. I can get you to the nitty gritty. But I mean, just like one basic one that isn't a proof by itself, but it's pretty awesome because you love history and stuff like that. Like, how many languages is there a word for Saturday that sounds or spelled very similar to Sabbath, right? Like the spellings in numerous languages are very similar to Saturday. Now, again, that's not a proof by itself.
That's interesting.
But that's one of like the icings on the cake. When you go through the deeper ones, straight looking at the Bible itself, and then you throw that on top, it's like, whoa, because there's like 130 or it's crazy.
Where I'm like, I was talking with a Jewish black belt friend of mine who came enrolled with me yesterday, and I know about the lunar calendar and the Julian solar Egyptian calendar. Mm-hmm. And I know the days and the differences in the months and the crossover, but like, I want to do some deeper looking at that, right? Because like, what changed when we switched it over? Like, I know that first year was like 448 days, if I'm not mistaken, but it's like, what other sort of changeovers were there? But yeah, that's linguistically, that's a great point. Like the word father, that's a damn near same sounding word in like every language. And I had a historian break that down for me. I was like, that's a great rabbit hole to pursue if you're looking at and I actually hadn't gone down that. I hadn't heard that before on the Sabbath. I'd have to.
Again, I wouldn't use that to convince somebody, but it's just a neat one that I thought you would like.
Yeah.
Being a historian. So just to finish the quick story how I got in. So I was convinced to keep the Sabbath. I quickly found Seventh-day Adventism was not right, so I was left to find who keeps the Sabbath, because I was convinced from the Bible, reading the Bible myself, not just from somebody saying you should keep it. I was reading the verses myself. It took a long time because you got to piece together a lot of things.
Yes.
And I also went through some proofs like why we don't keep the Sabbath anymore, and prove that those were wrong as well. I didn't just jump into it because somebody said, "Oh, we should keep the."
What are some of the arguments of why Sundays today all Christians pretty much go to church?
Sunday, they don't have anything to stand on. Okay, so the two most common ones are it's really thin, and what the problem is, I got to be straight with you. A lot of people don't really read the Bible. They go to church.
People don't read books, period.
Exactly, and they listen to what their pastor says, and they might read the Bible in passing, but they're not actually studying it and trying to remember as like they're studying one chapter, or they're studying a couple verses, right? Very few people go through the whole Bible, take notes, and go back through it again and again and again. And that's what you really have to do to get even a scratch of the surface. Because as you've seen, like the hypertext documents, there's so many verses in the New Testament that actually are direct references to Old Testament verses. There's a crazy picture like you were talking about that showed the errors between the two. There's another one that shows a hyperlink.
Continuity.
Yeah. So anyway, back to your question. So the one that they use that probably a lot of people don't even realize that they're using is in the New Testament. After Christ dies, they meet. The disciples meet behind closed doors. They're trying to hide from the Jews, trying to kill him. And it just happens to mention in passing that they met on a Sunday. But it wasn't even that they were having a religious meeting. They just met together to break bread. That's what it talks about. And it just says that
could have been
on
any
Sunday.
day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the only things in the Bible at all that they can even point to, which again isn't proof whatsoever, but that's the only thing they stand on. The real reason that everybody keeps it is because the Roman Catholic Church changed it. The Roman Catholic Church changed it to Sunday, and pretty much all of current.
But isn't Peter the first pope?
That's what they say. But there's actually.
I said that to my dad one time. He about lost his mind on me.
Yeah.
I was like, "Hey, we'll calm down. I was just making a Jesus joke, man."
There was multiple Peters, and there's an argument, that it wasn't the Peter.
Yeah, I've heard
of
that.
the New Testament. I mean, but I don't wade. I mean, I've read into that, but at some point, I don't wade into those waters too much, because when you dig into texts that are lost and things like that, a lot of stuff starts to get blurred.
Yeah. That's a whole the historiography of the Bible. Like that's what we'd say in my field, like the history of the history, right? Like and I know someone that has done this legwork, and I've talked with her briefly about it. She's a therapist, but she's done the scholarship on like, this is when this portion came together, then there was this period of time, and then these people worked on this portion, and she's done some of that about the history of how the Bible came together, right? Which I haven't gone that far, honestly. Really, honestly, from the fall, like Nicene Creed to the fall of the Roman Empire area, all the way through the Middle Ages, I'm suck on that, dude. Once we get to the Renaissance, Scientific Revolution, Reformation, the Enlightenment, I got you. We can get back on point, but like, man, the emergence of the early monarchies and stuff, that's a place where I'm like enriching I am gaining understanding there right now, but it's like what you're saying with, well, you just want me to know the whole history of the world now?
All right.
Like, dude, I'm 33. I've been really trying, but man, Middle Ages, medieval world, whatever, is a taxing time period for me. I'm just like,
I hear you. Everybody's got their interests.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've got to enough point to where that's like literally like the middle void of my knowledge on everything that's available time period wise. And I even had a class on it in college. Right. And I found a paper I wrote on Henry VIII in that class. And I was like, I don't even remember writing that. Don't even remember.
It's amazing how the brain works, huh?
Yeah.
Because when I went to college the first time, like in 2007, I took Calculus 1 and I did extremely well. Not bragging, but I did extremely well. I made like 100 on the final. I haven't used it since, and I plan to go back over it, but I couldn't do a lick of it right now.
Logic's like that for me. Logic changed, I think, maybe something neurologically. Like now, I think after having gone through the class logic, I think in more patterns. I organize information in groups differently, and like maybe logic just taught me how to do that. I don't know, but like trying to solve informal proofs of validity now. We're like a goldfish sometimes too. That's what's frustrating. Like you're saying, like I could read a chapter of the Bible and then like immediately not be able to take. And I would say also though, if I listened to it, I would have a higher retention rate personally.
Neat. That's neat how some people learn differently like that.
Yeah,
it really is. Because I'm a little, depends. If it's not very technical, then I learn very well like you through audio. But if it's technical stuff, I definitely do better reading.
Yeah.
Much better.
See, if it's technical, I do well with like a mix. Like if I can read and like building Legos, dude. I got all the Harry Potter Lego sets. They're not in here yet. Some of them are.
That's awesome.
They're just not inside. I got the bus over there, the night bus. But I got the whole castle, dude. I'm gonna put it right here. When I get done, it's 37 packages.
Has it got the dungeon, the basement, in the bottom?
Dude, it has. Well, I don't know what all's there.
Isn't that where the monster is?
It's huge. Yeah, the
basilisk. I don't know.
The basilisk. Yes, yeah. See, I haven't even read the books. I only watched the movies.
I haven't read the books either.
The movies so good.
I've heard the books are fantastic.
Yeah, Cora. She's read all of them, dude. I bought her all of them for like Christmas or birthday one year. But I need to. That's like I always have some fiction or fantasy or something going, like a book, a title, and I'm gonna go through those. I'm definitely gonna go through those because, dude, I freaking love those movies. By the time you get to like the third movie, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm a Potterhead.
Oh, that's awesome.
But like putting Legos together, kinesthetic. I got a visual. I'm like, well, that's actually, I guess, like I'm not reading though. It's like those martial arts books over there. They're picture books.
Yeah.
I joke with people. I'm like, yeah, those are picture books.
That's great.
Yeah. But I am way more that. But reading is my retention's it's always been kind of poor. I don't know if that's just my strength or weakness or what. But if I can do hands-on with any other learning, whether I'm reading an instruction book to hang something on the wall, like a TV mounting bracket or something, that's fine. Like technical writing stuff, but man, like breaking down the Bible is a chore.
Oh, yeah, it is, especially because I'm a slow reader. My retention's pretty good when I read, but I'm a slow reader.
Do you know how many like pages you do an hour or anything like that?
I did it one time, and I've gotten faster since then, but it was low. I mean, my wife reads much faster than I do. Now I have higher retention than she does for sure, but her retention's not bad. So, it's one of those averages things. It's like, what are you studying? I've read into some techniques that you can do to become a faster reader, and I've practiced a little bit of them, but to me, it takes so much work. Right now in life, I don't have time to apply that work because I'm still studying new things right now. So I'm just keeping the pace I'm at, and I'm happy with it. It just takes me probably a little bit longer than the average person, but I have a pretty great knowledge when I get done reading.
That's great. Like David Goggins, I heard him talk about this, and I don't know if I have what he's got going on to an extreme, but he's like, yeah, I didn't understand it when I read it, so then I had to read it and highlight it while I read it. Mm-hmm. So I've heard some people. I had this kid in one of my classes that was autistic, and he was talking that he told me, but he was super high functioning. Like he made an A in all my classes.
Wow. And
he was like, I listen and read at the same time.
Yeah.
He was saying he listens to audiobook and reads the physical text.
That's fantastic. I've used that too before.
Yeah.
It really is a great way to do it. I don't do it for everything, but especially things that you're having trouble understanding. Mm-hmm. Like that's what a doctor told me one time. I was meeting with him, and he said to get through medical school, he said he probably had ADHD before it was really diagnosed as a very old elderly doctor. And he said, I was like, that's fantastic you found this out. But what he did to get through medical school, because he would read into a tape recorder the literature, whatever he needs to study, and then he would listen to it while he's reading it again.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he would also, listen to it when he's driving about or whatever. But yeah, hearing something and seeing it on the page is a fantastic way to get into your brain.
Yeah. Well, see, that's like I have a little process where I'll read it and I underline while I'm reading it, and I will go back over key parts after I'm all said and done. But then I take it from there to notes, right? And then once I do the notes, a lot of times I will write the notes while I'm doing this and then type them.
Yes.
So like I work with the same information, and by the time I get it to the fourth mode there, it's heavily paraphrased into my own words as well, because that's a process I had to come up with to take it from the book that I was reading for my thesis or whatever to get it to where it's like, okay, this is what I assessed here, not what they said. You get plagiarism if you don't do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've probably heard too, there's many studies that say that the physical handwriting of things really makes it stick better in your brain. And I've noticed that too. I don't hardly do it anymore, but the best retention I've had on anything ever is when I hand wrote a bunch of flashcards. And of course, I went back through the flashcards, but I know from many things I've done since, the actual physical writing of those flashcards was the single best thing for my brain. And then what I do now, though, because I don't have quite the time to do that, and I find it's just as effective, is it's a combination. So I type digital flashcards, which is not the same as handwriting, but have you ever heard of spaced repetition learning? It's very popular for medical students, and the other big category of people is language learners. So there's a few different apps out there you can use, but the most popular one is called, I don't know how to pronounce it. I call it Anki, but I think it might be said Anki. It's Anki. It's free, open source.
I could see that being Anki.
Anki, yeah.
Like Ankh is the symbol of life, and like the cross with the thing
exactly
at the top.
What it is. You're right, because I've seen that symbol somewhere on their page. But it's free, and it's a flashcard app. But the magic behind it is it has a spaced repetition learning algorithm. So you do your flashcards, and you say whether you got it right or not. It's an honesty system. But then it feeds you back based on a timeline, the ones you get wrong, and you're supposed to hit that like every day. You're supposed to go through your flashcards, and it's been proven that spaced repetition is like the best way to learn, period, for retention.
I've seen anatomy students use that, and that's why, like, when these textbook people come by my office and they're like, "Look, we got this website that does everything for you. Look, the quiz is already there," and I'm like, I don't know if that's gonna help them. Right? Like, just the way they have it set up, it's way more dumbed down than what we're talking about. But man, you got to get creative if you're going to retain information, because man, I've like the number of things that I've written down and then forgot I wrote them down, then wrote them down again, and then found that I'd already done that in a document, like with martial arts techniques and stuff. I'm like, oh, dude, this new boxing combination. And then I find that it's like, okay, 18 months ago, I was doing that. I was doing it 18 months ago.
Yep.
Right.
I found that in my OneNote before. I keep everything in OneNote. And most of the time I search first to check. But a few times I've started writing stuff out, and then when I got halfway done, I just have a vague recollection I did this before, and then I just do Control-E, search. Sure enough, I got a whole page written out already. I'm like, oh, man. Same thing.
Yeah, which, that's our imperfect minds, I guess.
Yes.
Some people, I think, maybe aren't as afflicted with this, but I feel like, dude, look at yourself. I don't look as good as you, but I feel like we're two smart dudes, So it's like, I mean, the college professor, I don't know what you're into. What do you do for a job?
Okay, so I'm actually, currently I work as an inventory controller for a logistics company, but I'm actually going back to school. I have a year left. I'm getting a bachelor's in computer science.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I have 1 year left, and I wish I could have done it a lot sooner, because I've always been fascinated with computers, and I'm eating it up. I love it.
Do you have kids?
I have one little girl. She's 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah, I work full time and I go to school full time, so my life is very,
and you
very
have a
busy.
kid. I don't have a kid, but we're trying right now.
That's awesome.
Right, and I know Ben. Yeah.
Good luck to you.
Yeah. Thanks, bro. I've been talking. I was pissed off. When I was moving the studio, I did a podcast with this newer dad. His kid was, I think, 4 months old or something. Dude, he said all the greatest stuff in the world. Like, I was asking him some real focused questions about, like, first time, and it wasn't recording that part. And I was like, oh, that's why I keep like looking at the camera, because like I've gotten super paranoid because of the move, because like I do all of this by myself. So like if there's a mistake, it all falls on me. Like I can't blame anybody. So it's I've made a couple of small mistakes, just like I was saying with bumping one of my switches there. I moved all of this stuff from my house studio that I had set up and swapping equipment out, changing settings on the computer I'm using because I got a new Mac for the studio. But it's been a kind of a challenge getting my logistics because I took a step. This is like the graduate school version of the podcast. I was joking earlier.
Oh, nice.
Right? I'm in graduate school now.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, I'm still not making any money.
This is professional.
Right. But I was like, it's not just what everybody can go do.
Right.
But
and you enjoy it, right?
Yeah. Oh, dude. Yeah. And that's like, well, like what you're saying is like after I've thought about that a lot is when we do have our kid, I'm not at school, but I teach, and I'm fortunately starting to teach more online. And that's going to be a big change. It frees up 12 hours a week of my time.
That's great.
That's huge.
That's what I'm doing right now is online schooling.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it without it. There's no way.
Yeah. What do you think about this coming semester? How were you going to UFIS or what?
No, because UFIS doesn't have hardly anything in the way of online learning.
It's not the year 2020.
Yeah, exactly. And what's shocking is the U of A doesn't even have. They have a very few things, but no computer science, nothing like that. Colorado State University is where I'm attending.
Great.
There's a few different online schools that have a computer science program, and Colorado State came highly recommended. It was funny because when I first started attending, they didn't have computer science. I started attending like March last year, and the fall, so in July, they started the very first session of their computer science program, and I immediately jumped. I was on like a management information system track because that's really the only thing I could find. The other school I was looking at to go to for computer science just didn't jive with me. So it really worked out in my favor. Do
you ever have to physically go to the university?
Never.
Oh, that's great, dude.
Yeah.
Like here's Tech the other day was like, we're going to do an online degree in this and this now. Go tell your professors. Right? Like us, we're way behind the curve in community college, right? But it's like what you said, like U of A, like there's so many people. I don't know if it's just the South or what, but
it's just behind the times.
And it's kind of remarkable. I just went through I had to go through a class to teach online, and it was like this cookie cutter educational technology class that I literally took nothing away from, but I spent probably 40 hours doing it. And I was blew my mind, but yeah, that's what a great thing to be getting involved in. 'Cause especially right now in education, it's like all the professors that could not transition effectively to teaching online are freaking out right now. And I'm like, I'll be in my studio if you need me. Give me a call.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So that's great. You're already in the online mode because anybody that's taken face-to-face is freaking out right now because they taken face-to-face. They want to be online. Our university offers some online, but they make people come take the final in person.
I can understand that, but I mean, that, like you're saying, I think what you're alluding to is that limits your geographic range, right? I mean, that's sort of.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of ways around that. They can do proctoring, you could, because there's sites all over the US. If you really want to be really strict, like I'm not certain, but I think probably my capstone class, I'll probably have to go get proctored for an exam. But I know some schools, you don't even have to go to a physical building, in your state or whatever. Some of them, you buy a webcam or something like that, and someone actually proctors you over the webcam while you're taking the exam in your own house.
Have you heard of Respondus?
No.
It's a lockdown browser, but now they've evolved.
Lockdown?
It's like the name of a software, like OneNote or something.
Okay.
So it's called Respondus Lockdown Browser. So you download it and you go to it and you log into Blackboard or whatever the software is, and then you go find your test. And when you start the test, you cannot click anything else on the computer, right? Or like I don't know. I don't even.
That's the lockdown.
Yeah. I don't even know if it fails you or what, but like you can't.
Yeah.
Or you got to wait till the time expires, or you hit special keys to get out. I don't know. I'm not a student anymore, and I honestly don't require my students to use that.
Right.
But now they've stepped it up to where like it's webcamming you, and it knows if you like look sideways or if there's somebody else sitting beside you, it flags all that. So the physical need of a human being to proctor it with that software, you got to pay like a licensing every semester to use that. So,
well, the way that Colorado State University gets around it, and I assume a lot of other online schools do, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like a lot of the tests you're talking about, the finals, would be like multiple choice or like fill in the blank type stuff, right?
Yeah.
See, we don't do anything like that. We do every week. We have quizzes, but that are multiple choice, but they're very low points. So all your points come from essays, or in computer science, it can be a combination of like a well-written essay and computer code that you have to write. So, I mean, it's not really something you have to proctor somebody on. You know, it takes a long time to write an essay, and you can check for plagiarism. It's incredible how good plagiarism checking is now. I mean, because they pull in from all kinds of databases, and I can see the results when I turn mine in. They recommend that I check it myself before, like, I write a draft, I submit it as a draft and check it, because thankfully I've never had a problem, but some kids have found out that they turned something in and they didn't intentionally plagiarize whatsoever, but there's just so much stuff in the database. There was actually
flag certain key.
Yes. But I've seen lots of my stuff flagged, but it has to be a certain percentage, you know? So it's usually like a little part of a sentence, but there's multiple of those. So everything that I turn in has like 20, 30, 40 flags, but it's like 2 words, you know? So it's not plagiarism.
Yeah. It's when you get sentences.
Yeah.
You know, words and a bunch of words in a row. Like Tony Robbins, I tell me, he got hit for like 39 verbatim words in a row.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins, the guru guy?
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
That guy. He does the spirit fingers when he's on stage. He does all this crazy shit. Speaking of cults.
Yeah.
Let's go walk on some coals with him.
Woo, boy.
Yeah. Some of my friends are big time into him. And I've considered, you know, I've never read his stuff. I've watched that Netflix documentary and I've done my research about him. I've read about him. I've heard people talk about him. I mean, the dude's undoubtedly successful. I just think he's a sleazebag. Like, I just can't. He annoys me. I want to punch him in the face.
Hey.
I wouldn't do that though.
You're a chill guy. I know you wouldn't.
Yeah. I joke around. I was telling this guy earlier, we were talking about police reform. I was like, capable of great violence. Never want to use any of it. Like, ever.
Yeah, you're a black belt in
jiu-jitsu and judo. And it's like, I just don't, because I was arguing that police should be training that weekly.
I've heard that argument. Yeah, and that makes sense.
But yeah. So it's, I would never want to get in a fight. That would suck. Yeah. I've been in sanctioned fights, MMA, kickboxing, numerous jiu-jitsu matches. Like, I don't even know how many. It's so many jiu-jitsu matches. Even some judo matches, a judo tournament I did. But it's like, man, and that's against trained people, you know, and stuff. But it's
killers.
Like, I would never want to use any of the stuff. That's not why. It's just like why if you have a gun near your bed, like, that is the last shit in my life I ever want to have to resort to. Like,
absolutely.
Oh, somebody just kicked in my bedroom door and I'm here sleeping in my bed. Like, I'll tell you, a police detective I know here in town, trained his whole family. His wife's parents it was up north, and it was Michigan or Minnesota. I can't remember which. Yeah, there was a home invasion and her dad got killed.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, but something happened where he like wounded the people that broke in. But they like beat up the mom too. Like, but it ended up being like he died, she lived, but he had like wounded or killed some of the people that broke in. But man, that's the stuff. It's like, that's why I train martial arts, is because I think I can respond to that better.
Absolutely.
If it happens. But then begs the question, it's like, where cops are just like, cops are always going to be better at their gun than hand to hand and de-escalation techniques and using words to calm people down instead of intimidation and stuff like that. So, and I get that. Just like I will always be less skillful with a gun, right? Like, I mean, I'm stereotypically like, I grew up hunting, but I do not shoot my handguns enough.
Oh.
I do not.
Me neither.
Like I've had 2 concealed permits. I just don't shoot enough, man.
I've got a concealed permit too, and I've never shoot. I mean, I've shot like twice since I got it, and that was it.
Yeah.
I'm not a very good marksman either.
Yeah.
I'm decent with a rifle, but with a pistol, I am awful.
Yeah. I'm just wishful hoping. I also have a machete under my belt. I've like trained with way more. It's like an SOG.
Yeah.
But like I've done like 100 hours of Filipino stick fighting and stuff. Like
Ooh.
I've got a bunch of
I don't even know
stick
about
and knife work, right? Like it's basically billy club length sticks, but they're made out of this. It's like a bamboo. It's super
People
hard.
fight each other with the sticks.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. You Magellan, you know Magellan, you know, the guy.
explorer.
Yeah. He got killed by some stick fighters on the beach.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and 2, it's funny is I got this guy, he's coming in. He's actually, I thought he was from the Philippines. He went to med school in the Philippines. He may have lived there, but he's actually told me he's Chinese, but, spent a significant portion of his life in the Philippines. He trains me on Thursdays right now. He's 72 and he's an orthopedic surgeon.
Wow.
And he has all this background knowledge in Filipino stuff. He's been showing me this 2 sword kata, like this double sword, and there's like these shorter Filipino swords. And I'm like, this is probably what he knows the most of, and is showing me the least of. He's showing me mostly Japanese martial. His 6-degree judo black belt.
6th degree?
Yeah, dude, here's another thing. He's a Wing Chun master. You know,
I don't know what
Bru-
Wing Chun
like
is.
Bruce Lee, the wooden dummy.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's the, yeah.
Yeah, so I've got 2 wooden dummies in there I can show you before we wrap up the podcast, or after we wrap up the podcast. But it's Bruce Lee kind of made that art, and he knows this kata. He's taught me it's like over 100 moves in 3 different styles. I was like, dude. They say he's on a whole other level. He can kill people with blades. He knows Aikido, Kendo, like multiple sword styles. Like this dude's a martial arts master. And then he'll even joke around. He's like, what's the best way? So somebody's like, well, what's the best way to defend yourself? He's like, a gun. It's just like, that's the fastest, you know?
Absolutely.
But it's just like, I mean, particularly anymore, and it's been that way since like the 1600s, man, 1500s, middle 1500s was when we really first started seeing gunpowder used for invasions and stuff. Mm-hmm. Japan invaded Korea with gunpowder. So
my dad always told me, though, you know, whatever weapon you decide to pull out in a fight, you know, don't pull out any weapon that you don't want shoved up your ass. So you really got to know what you're doing, you know, because you never know who you're fighting.
Yeah. I just gotta do better on we all do. Everybody that owns a gun should go practice shooting it.
Yes.
And I'm the world's worst, man. I gotta get, it's a time equation for me partially, but we are going to go do, there's a guy here at the gym, Chief of Campus Police, teaches concealed permits, offers classes here at the gym. And he has a range we're going to go shoot at here one Saturday. He's just going to, if you want to come to the range, here's bring this much ammo and $10 or something. We'll either go to his or there's another range we can go to in Pottsville. But dude, I'm just like, and I hit him up about that because I'm like, dude, I need to go shoot. Like I'm sitting here like going to sleep with my wife who I love a lot. And what if something crazy happens like that home invasion story from those people I know? Like
shotgun.
that,
you just need a shotgun.
I got a couple single shots, New England firearms.
Short one right by your bed. You don't have to worry about aiming too much.
I have a youth model single shot 20 gauge loaded with buckshot.
There you go.
All right. So,
and it won't go if you had slugs, it might go through walls and hit somebody with buckshot. You're good.
Yeah, slugs are. And I will say I shot a deer with buckshot one time, like 4 times, and the motherfucker ran off. Like knocked it down, bled everywhere where it fell down, and then ran down this hill, and I never found it. I was so upset.
It's awful.
Cora, have you met her?
No.
Yeah, she's probably just saying hey.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'll introduce. I bet she just got here. I'll introduce y'all after we finish casting.
Cool.
So let's get back on our thread here of where were we? We're talking about a bunch of great stuff, by the way.
Sure. But, I'd love to go all over the place. So whatever you want to do. Back to how I got in the cult. We're almost there pretty much. But I'll say one more thing about the Sabbath. I don't want to keep hammering it but
I don't even go to church, and it's on Saturday. Okay. Like, that's how I joke with people about it. I'm like, it's really like people say I'm going to church tomorrow. I'm like, it's really today. Like I joke with people about it because I'm pretty convinced. So
you can go whenever you want, but it's like that was what was commanded was the Sabbath day. Back in Genesis, there's 7 days of creation, 7th day's rest, 6 days of creation, 7th day's rest. But anyhow, the only thing I want to say that was it's sort of funny is a lot of evangelical Protestants, Christians, whatever you want to call them, they say that the Old Testament's like done away with, right? And they just follow the New Testament.
I heard that.
We don't even have to get into that. There's so many arguments against that. It's wild. But anyway, the point is, even if you do go with that argument, right? And then you say, well, all the stuff in the Old Testament was done away with, which would be the Sabbath command, although in the New Testament, Paul does say there still remains a Sabbath rest. It is a little strange how he words it. So if you're really trying to stretch it, you might say it's like, it's not literal, it's figurative or something. But regardless of that, if you say we don't keep the Old Testament anymore, you say it's just the New Testament. It's interesting that the same people will, if you ask them, well, do you believe in the 10 Commandments? And they'll say yes.
Which is number 4, right?
Sabbath is number 4. Okay. It's the only one they don't keep. But yet they'll say they believe in the 10 Commandments. They want the statues out in front of the, in front of the courthouses, all that kind of stuff. But they'll we don't like that one. That one's too restrictive, We're okay with not murdering people and not committing adultery, and we're okay with loving God with all of our heart. But number 4, no.
Well, and that's kind of this white lady, right?
Ellen G. White.
Ellen G. White. That was like she had some vision about the 4th commandment, right? That a light shining down on it.
That sounds familiar, but I don't recall.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out. I was reading about their assessment of the Sabbath, and it's just like, so what day we chill out is more important than not killing people. Like, that's what I was joking in my head. I'm like, oh, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only reason I remembered it was number 4. But this is some light shining on the 4th tablet or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how I got into church. So I started studying. I found the Sabbath, said I had to keep it. Figured Seventh-day Adventist wasn't the way. Ellen G. White has a lot of false prophecies. So, you don't follow false prophets. So, or prophetesses, however you say the female version. But so I started looking for churches that kept the Sabbath, and I found a few, and eventually I just stumbled upon the Restored Church of God. Started reading
here in Arkansas.
Well, I stumbled upon their website because I was reading all online, anything I could find online, and they did have they still do. They have a group that meets in Neosho, Missouri. Okay. So I would drive from Fayetteville all the way up to Neosho every Saturday.
Is that a couple hours?
Yeah, I think it's about 2 hours. Okay. Hour and a half.
We used to do a big basketball tournament there from my high school, cool. Right? Like every year they went to Neosho.
Yeah. So I stumbled upon them, found that they keep the Sabbath, and I started reading some of their other doctrines, and that's what really worked for me, because not only did I find a church that kept the Sabbath and correctly how I understood it, but they have a lot of teachings, and they started answering a lot of questions I had. They answered the once saved always thing that I was looking for.
What do they say about that?
They don't believe in once they've always saved.
It does seem kind of bullshit. I mean,
it is. It's complete. I mean,
sorry if I know you and you're my friend and you believe that.
It's all good.
And you listen to the podcast.
I don't want to offend anybody. You. Yeah, I love everybody.
Yeah.
And I don't want to come across sounding like I'm attacking religion. It's got a great side. I personally think there's a lot of negatives that people need to address as well. But I do see the benefits as well. So I'm not here to demonize religion in general, although I think ultimately long term humanity, it'd probably be good to phase that out. But I'm talking about thousands of years, long time.
Just think about how much it's changed in thousands of years.
Right.
I mean, shit, I'm thousands of years into the narrative before I even hit Christianity. Mm. And two, this is something that's always bothered me. Is, Ra, and El are all different deities in Mesopotamia.
That's a good point.
I made that point to my dad one time, and he was like, I'll look into that.
Well, the whole story of you know, I mean, the Christian fundamentalists argue, you know, that the Hebrews were first and all that, right? But according to historians and all that kind of stuff, there were civilizations before that, right? And ancient Mesopotamia, their religion and their flood story, all of their things with their religion, if you believe that they really were first, it's interesting how much similarities there are between the early Christian writings and ancient Mesopotamia. I'm sure
We call that syncretism,
I've heard that word.
right? So it's basically that. Well, there's so many examples of syncretism too. Of like, well, I mean, we've talked about some of them as like, let's syncretize these pagan symbols into this.
Exactly.
It's a repeated process, like over thousands of years. That's the one I say it's changed. That's directly like the shift from Roman polytheism to Christianity is one of the most fascinating things to me. I'm like, you guys were like, let's just add every single god.
Yeah.
Right? Like your God, his God, their God.
It's all good.
And then you're like, this is the official thing. All right. This is the direction we're headed now. Like that's a momentous shift. One of the books I use for my class is like, there is no greater cultural shift or change that occurred in the ancient Mediterranean world or in the entire Mediterranean world. And that's arguable, right? So interesting. But syncretism, we were on Mesopotamia. What were you?
Oh, I was going to say about syncretism, just you said, like the Roman Catholic Church, they have so many, but just the funny one to me is that one of the hats you see that they wear. It's like tall, it's like Dagon, the fish god. That's what it is. If you look at the side of it, it's like a fish. On top, it's got the split like that, you know, and that's taken from pagan.
Is the fish you see on like the back of cars from paganism?
I think I've seen something about that, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I always heard it was from the
Ishtar or something like that.
Okay, yeah. No, that's Easter. The Easter story is apparently some linkages to Ishtar, but the fish, I heard was from the symbol or from the story of the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish, or like he multiplied and fed the 5,000. Is that?
I mean, that could say that's where it originated, but what I vaguely remember is it's much more ancient than that.
I'll look into that.
Look into that.
Yeah, I haven't heard that about the Dagon.
Oh, there's so many in
With
the
the
Roman
hat,
Church.
yeah.
Oh, that's scratching the surface. That's just one that's funny because when you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, especially if you look at the ancient symbols for Dagon and stuff. It's just, I mean, and it's not even like hidden. You can find in the literature.
Did you start getting exposed to this stuff is a part of the teachings of
okay. Yes, but it's not, it's the interesting thing about that in particular, like the Roman syncretism, Roman Catholic Church syncretism, it's not like just Restored Church of God's teachings. I mean, they pull a lot from other.
I would talk shit about it too.
It's hilarious, but at the same time, that's one thing I hated about the cult was like it seemed very loving and everything at first, but the deeper I got into it, it really turns your heart against everybody. Like I really saw us looking at everybody like they were awful and vile,
like judgmental,
very judgmental. Always talking, like especially, I won't say all the ministers by any stretch, but many of the sermons were attacking the other religions, and you know you sort of have to do that when you're a cult and you say that we have the only right way. But when you hear it over and over again and it's so extreme, at some point you're like, do I really want to live my life like this?
It's like partisan.
It's extreme partisan because I mean they do point out many good things, but it's not. It's very aggressive, it's just the way it's conveyed. And like there's kids in the audience and they're being raised that way. And you see this and you're just like, do you really want to just want to just constantly berate other religions and say they're horrible people and stuff like that? And it's just not a good way for kids to be raised up.
Yeah. Yeah. So you found this Neosho group.
Well, yeah, I found the Restored Church of God through their website, which the headquarters is in.
The HQ's in Neosho.
No. The headquarters is in Wadsworth, Ohio, which I actually moved to. Wow. I stayed at the compound.
The compound.
Yeah. So, do I need to tell you anything else before that? Yeah. So I found them. I started reading a lot of their teachings, and this is one of the things I'm happy about that I actually went through this whole process is that I'm a naturally curious person, and I found out some things about myself through this whole process that have helped me realize some things that I need to tame. Like one of them is maybe jumping onto things too quickly, and that was my major problem with this. Because Frank, I spent almost 6 years in the cult. Okay, so if I would have taken a slower pace and I would have stayed in Fayetteville, then I probably would have come across some of the teachings that were false within like a year and a half, and I would have only been in the cult for like a year and a half, 2 years versus like 5.5.
Do you think it's because they kind of, I'm going to say confirmation bias for lack of a better way to describe it, but you had these questions that you
Yes.
wanted answered.
Yes.
So when they answered them for you,
Yes.
was that kind of like a confirmation bias? Like,
Absolutely.
oh, wow.
Absolutely. But exactly, yes. But I mean, the interesting thing though is a lot of the stuff they teach in the literature itself, they teach a lot more verbally through sermons, which you don't have access to when you're not a member. And even then, when you become a member, I'm sort of jumping a little bit, but this is one of the ways a lot of cults get you. So for anybody listening, if you know somebody who's in a cult or anything else like that, is they're constantly feeding you like new information. And not necessarily every cult, but that's one way they sort of overwhelm you. Because if you really believe and you want to learn and you have, that good spirit, you're like, oh, I believe in this, then you're constantly sort of playing catch up, trying to stay up with the latest and greatest. So you don't have that much time to go back through all the stuff that they've already produced. Especially if you were like me, where I moved the compound. I call it a compound. It wasn't really we'll get into that, but it sort of ended up being a compound for sure. But that's one thing they just overwhelm me with. Because like I said, if I would have stayed in Fayetteville, I just would have been going on Saturdays. I would have had lots of free time to go through all that old material. But after I found them in November of 2011, and in the end of October, I believe, of 2012, I moved to Wadsworth, Ohio. And the reason I moved was because I was going to college at the time, and I was about to get into a program, which I'm actually glad I didn't get into. I was going to get into a physical therapy assistant program at NWAC, but I had to wait until the following June to get in. So I had this downtime, and I found the church in November. I found out I was going to have to wait. So November, I found that church. You go fast forward, and like in July or so, I found out I was going to have to wait till a year to get into that program, the physical therapy. So I found out that the church actually has a college where they teach people in depth the religion and all that kind of stuff.
Like their own.
Yeah, all their teachings,
yeah.
and supposed to go above and beyond, because basically the idea of it is it's sort of like ministry. It's supposed to be like ministry training, but not everybody who goes is going to be ministry. So what they call it is like, even though the ministers have to go to the college, you won't necessarily be a minister. They say you're going to be a pillar in your area. So lots of people go. And there's not that many people in the church. Every time I looked, when I had access to actually look, because they don't say the numbers publicly, but I actually worked in many different departments there. I'm jumping ahead, but every time I checked the numbers, which very few people have access to, it was under 3,000 people. So
like worldwide?
Worldwide, though. They literally have congregations worldwide. I mean,
Okay.
India, all over the place.
How big was the place in Ohio, like congregation-wise? A few hundred?
Yes, exactly. I don't think it got a little over 200 at one point, but it's constantly going like this, So I don't think it ever dropped below. I was gonna say I don't think it ever dropped below 100, but it might have got in the very high 90s at one point, dropping down to like 95 or something. But it expands and contracts because the problem in most cults, you constantly have people leaving. So that's how they sort of keep their size, is got people coming in, got people going out. But the problem is not the problem, excuse me, but my experience, and this is just one cult, right? So I can't say it applies to every cult, but the vast majority of people I saw leave, it wasn't for doctrinal reasons. It was for they got offended or they wanted to go back to the world.
Stupid people shit.
They were tired of keeping the Sabbath. You know, it wasn't because they found the error, you know.
Yeah, which should be not the goal, but what you're like, if you're going to leave,
right?
Like, let's make it a really good reason.
Exactly, and that's one thing that probably kept me in longer than what I would have stayed too, because I wanted to find the error right before I left, and I saw all these people leave that weren't that great of people, and I saw why they left, and I was like, I can't be like that. But
were you married to your wife when you moved to Ohio?
Yeah. So
what was her take on this
yeah,
stuff?
that's a good question, and I won't talk too much about her because I'd love for her to give her own thing. But I tell you the start for sure. When I first found him in November, she was really scared because she was raised Baptist as well.
Did you guys meet at church?
No, it's a funny story.
I met my wife at church.
No, I was in college in Fort Smith, and I was working at Sam's Club as a cashier, and I checked her out. So
yeah. Nice. I used to work at Walmart in high school for a couple of years.
Yeah. It's a funnier story, but I won't tell it because I'd rather go into all this stuff. But so she was really scared. Unbeknownst to me, she called her parents and was like, I don't know what Brock's gotten into. Please help, whatever. So about a month or two after I had been studying heavily and I had a break from school during this time, so I was just constantly reading, literally. And I didn't read that much before this time. And I went from like not reading to literally reading like 14 hours a day.
Wow.
Every day. I read a ton of material.
You were in the rabbit hole.
I was in the rabbit hole. And I was, so anyway, so I just told her, I said, look, I'm trying to read this stuff to disprove it too. I'm not like, oh, this is great. I found the truth, I mean, it came across that way, but at the same time, I was trying to read it and find errors. I said, please, just read this first book. If you find anything, let me know, and then you can get me off the path, And that first book she read, and she was sold. So...
What these books you were reading, were they propaganda? Like, or were they just like these resources they put together, very persuasive? Were they so dense that you just kept moving on to new material and didn't extrapolate inconsistencies, or what?
Well, yes and no. I'd say no for the most part, because a lot of them, most of them are just straight doctrinal stuff. So even though they have a lot of words around it, you're constantly having to reference your Bible. It's not like reading an essay where somebody's telling you how things are. It's constantly referring to verses in the Bible. So you got your Bible open, you're reading what they say, you read what it says for yourself, and then you don't just read the verse that they read, and they even tell you that too. They say read the whole, you don't want to take a verse out of context, right? So you read the whole chapter when they tell you just to read a verse, because you're constantly checking to see if what they're saying is jiving, right? Because you can take a verse out of the Bible, and if somebody doesn't know the not even just the paragraph, it could be the chapter, it could be the whole book that it's written in, and it can mean something that it really doesn't if you don't have the context of the chapter or the whole book, right? So it was just a lot of study. A lot of the books I read were just straight doctrinal stuff, and it made sense. Like the Sabbath, the holy days, that was a big one for me. The one that was a little more sketchy, it made a lot of sense, but it didn't have technical detail, and I always wanted to get more into it because it was a pillar of their teachings, but I got pulled off by all their other teachings. So to your answer, did I not look deep enough into some of it? Absolutely. With this one book, it's have you ever heard of British Israelism? It's supposedly it's been disproven pretty thoroughly by historians. I haven't read.
Is this the idea that one of the lost tribes ended up in Britain?
Yeah, all the lost tribes, they're supposedly lost. Like one of them is Britain, and one of them is the United States. They say Ephraim is Britain, Manasseh is the United States, and the birthright blessings were promised, it's complicated, but Ephraim and Manasseh, and that's why they say that's why we're reaping the benefits, all these benefits, the United States, because Manasseh was supposed to get them. So and it is more detailed than that, and they make a convincing argument. But what they don't do in the book is actually do a thorough job of showing you how the supposed lost tribes migrated.
I'm fast. I tried to get somebody on the podcast to talk about that, and I haven't been able to.
It's fascinating. They put a little bit of proof in the book, but it's not enough to be proof. What they put in the book is the main thing that comes to mind is they look at country emblems like flags, and their symbols that they use currently, and then they go back into the actual Old Testament and what it says about each child that supposedly the tribes came out of, and they look at what God said about them, and they make the connections and say, look, their flags their flags current today have them, and again, that's not enough, but
That's
to somebody who's
symbols is a great way to go about it.
it is, and it is convincing enough when you're reading other material that you're like, oh my goodness, like, is that just a coincidence? That doesn't seem likely. And unfortunately, I've moved on and I haven't had time to look at the disapproval of the migration and stuff. But I've just briefly read that it's been thoroughly disproven multiple times over. So, and again, I never even proved that where they migrated to. In fact, in the college that I went to at the cult, that's one of the things that pissed me off was most of the courses were higher level, like teaching you stuff above and beyond what's taught in the literature, because it was designed for ministers, so you're supposed to know more, you're supposed to know more in detail. But when we got to the class that was supposed to teach the American, British, Israel stuff, the guy literally just taught us the book that everybody had access to. And when he got to that specific point about the migration, which is the whole foundational point of this, if you can't trace the migrations, stop talking. So he said, oh, this guy in Worldwide, like literally it was like 2 sentences. He said, this guy in Worldwide did all the research. If you want to know more about it, you can find some of his writings out there. And then just kept talking about something else. And I was like, that is what this whole class is supposed to be about, what you just said in 2 sentences.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, at that time, I was there working for the cult.
Was your wife attending this college too? Sorry to keep asking about her.
Yes. No, please ask. Please ask.
But
no,
it's
ask
just,
anything about her.
Because I wanted to know, just context on like you both are going through this together.
Yes, exactly.
Like holistically.
And that's what a lot of people told us too, even in the cult. They were like, you're very lucky your wife came along. Because a lot of people get split up.
Wow.
And
I was reading on the Adventist views on divorce. That's like the justification. The unequally yoked type of an argument. Like, oh, your spouse didn't want to be a believer.
Right.
Well, they had to go, and that's okay.
They teach. It's weird. This church, the cult RCG, they teach sort of a hybrid of that. It's a little more loving in one sense and not in another sense. So they teach. I can't remember the verse verbatim, but the verse says if they are pleased to dwell. In the Bible, it says if they're pleased to dwell, you should not divorce them. And they believe that. So like if your spouse, if you come into the church is what they call it, right? So the cult, when I'm using their terms, we always say the church. That is RCG, not Christians as a whole, because according to RCG, they don't know anything. Christians aren't going to get the benefits, that are coming, etc. So anyway, they say if your spouse doesn't believe, but they're pleased to dwell, don't divorce them, stay with them, But if they aren't pleased to dwell, basically they still try and work with them. They heavily encourage you stay with them. But if it gets to the point where like it's wrecking your life and your kids are wrecked by it too, because your spouse is being, very aggressive, whatever you want to say, then they make the claim that because you weren't married in the church, it wasn't ordained by God. Mm-hmm. So they will sanction, you can get a divorce. So in one sense, it's a little more loving than what you said, but because they do try and keep them together. But one thing sort of on that topic that blew me away when I first heard it, and I didn't hear it till I was already moved to Wadsworth, I didn't realize that, and it ties to one of their deepest doctrines, that they they think interracial marriage is a sin.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it's bad.
What a bad time to hold that belief.
But what's crazy is the pastor, his name's David Pack. He's the leader of RCG. He wouldn't split up marriages that were currently interracial. But what was really weird was in like one sermon, he just mentioned in passing, like he may have to address that at some point. He's like, he left it out there that someday we may have to split up interracial couples in the church.
And were there interracial couples present?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Oh yes. There's interracial couples that they're not. I mean, there's a few interracial couples that are just in the church, right? And then there's at least one or two that are actually ministers, which is really rare.
Is there any justification that they had? I would say there's no compelling justification that could be made. But what were they saying about that? It's just some
Okay, that's
verse
where
or
yes. So this is where this is goofy. So this one I actually never fully bought, but it wasn't foundational to my belief, so I didn't care that much. It wasn't one of those where, because some of the things in the Bible, if somebody's teaching them, you're like, well, that doesn't apply to my future, and it's not a direct command from God, so I'm just going to gloss over that for now and focus on the things that are like, you should do this, you shouldn't do this, right? So where they get that from, it's pretty crazy, is in Genesis, when it talks about the reason for it's either, I get confused, it's either the flood or the Tower of Babel. No, it's not the Tower of Babel. I believe it's the flood. It says that this.
Sorry, there's a kids' martial arts class going on.
All good.
Next door. They yell.
That's all good.
That's their martial arts yell.
With the headphones on, it sounded like an animal, so I was like, what is that?
Coyotes.
Yeah, coyotes. They say that it says in the Bible that the sons of God, like, intermixed among
Like the Nephilim. Is that we maybe talked about this briefly at that bachelor party.
Probably so.
Right. Okay. What a weird thing to talk about at a bachelor party.
Yeah.
Getting into like okay, but yeah, sons of God. Like that's a weird verse I asked my dad about
It is.
as a little kid.
Especially because some other areas of the Bible where it talks about the sons of God, it is talking about angels.
Mm-hmm.
So that term there, some people make the jump and say that the sons of God is angels there, but most people say absolutely not. But it's interesting that there are terms in the Bible, more than just this one, that actually mean different things in different places.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to talk before we get done briefly about the Hebrew language.
Yeah.
But just to finish this one little thing, coming off that, basically, when you read that whole story of what was happening before the flood and what the Bible actually says, I can't remember verbatim right now, but they think that what it says is that it was an intermixing of the races that was the reason that God caused the flood. So, God said Noah was the only righteous one, not even his family, but he decided to save Noah's family, right? And everybody else died. Well, the verses leading up to that, when you read like the reasoning, what was going on, I wish I could remember the exact, verse.
And I'm familiar with what you're talking about because that's where like we mentioned the Assyrians earlier. That's all of these cultural groups that I mentioned earlier are apparently descendant of Noah's sons, right? Like the Assyrians, their patriarch is Asher.
Yeah.
Which was that Noah's grandson or son? I can't remember.
I used to know, but frankly,
Ham, Shem, and Japheth were the three sons, so it would have had to have been
Japheth.
Yeah.
They say, and then RCG teaches that Ham was black, Japheth was yellow, and Shem was white. That's what they teach. Shemites. Yeah, they teach that. And so of course, they believe everybody alive comes from,
What color is Noah?
That's the crazy thing.
And his wife.
That's what they say. And that's what a kid asked me one time at camp, because I used to run the summer camp. I was a administrator right under the lead administrator, because we had kids come from all over the world. It was a pretty cool experience. And I did that 3 years. But one kid asked me one time, it blew my mind. I was like, I can't believe I never thought of that. But they do. RCG doesn't have a teaching on it, but Worldwide does. So they just pull Worldwide teaching. They say that Noah and his wife were white, but they popped out those 3 different color babies.
You know anything about like the science of like there's been some research, and like I had a professor that went into it when she taught history of Japan. I was her graduate assistant, and she's like, it is literally all the distance from the equator.
Say what again?
Literally the pigmentation and some of the genetic fact, it's all the distance of the equator. And she broke it down, and I thought it was compelling, and Cora brought it up the other day and was like, I think that's so fascinating. She'd remembered like the whole narrative, and I was like, that is I remember what she was talking about. I was like, that is fascinating. And
there's stuff like I heard the other day. I was listening about vitamin D. It may have been on Joe Rogan's, somebody on Joe Rogan's podcast, but it fascinated me because like black people, whatever you want to call them, I love black people. I don't know if that's a negative term or not, but
in history that is the term. Like for example, in Arkansas history, in my Arkansas history textbook is on the shelf somewhere, and it's like universally refers to them as blacks.
Okay, so I heard that they have a hard time producing enough vitamin D in the United States, especially like I think roughly above Arkansas is where we don't get enough. I think it's UVA or B. I can't remember which one. I think it's UVB. Like below, roughly, if you draw a line to the top of Arkansas, below there's enough UVB for everybody, but above there's not hardly any UVB, and then black people have a hard time with their skin tone absorbing it anyway, because that's supposed to be what it's for, is near the equator, protecting from those UVs. So everybody above Arkansas has a hard time producing vitamin D, but especially black people. So they really need to supplement with vitamin D and vitamin K to get it into their body.
And when I've heard some comparisons made on that with the COVID, right?
That's where it was coming from.
Okay, yeah.
It sounds convincing. It certainly does. I mean, but as you know, correlation isn't causation. So just because most of the patients with COVID presented with very low vitamin D levels doesn't mean that vitamin D will protect you from COVID. Mm-hmm. I think it's a convincing argument. I'm just saying I wouldn't jump to that conclusion. I say take vitamin D. It's cheap.
Well, take care of your immune health, exercise, eat healthy food, stay hydrated. Like I saw Vice was like, this healthy 24-year-old's got coronavirus and he almost died. Yeah. The dude weighed like 400 pounds.
It's awful.
Like, I don't know any healthy people that weigh 400 pounds. Not even the 6'6" All-American heavyweight wrestler. Yeah. I know. That's just there aren't probably any 400-pound healthy people. Mm-hmm. But that's just like, I was like, come on, guys. I follow your page and you hit me with this shit. So anyway, the kid asked you this question.
Yeah, he asked about Noah and how the black and white and yellow came out of one couple. So the teaching is really loose. But like I said, they say that before the flood, before everybody got destroyed,
the deluge.
That's why it doesn't make any sense, because it's like they were having mixed races. They were birthing them, but yet you weren't supposed to mix the races. It doesn't make any sense. So it's almost like they're saying that just because that's what I thought it said was they were birthing mixed races before, but at the same time it couldn't be, because that's what they believe caused God to flood the earth. So I guess they're just saying that just Noah and his wife had the 3 different colors. What I vaguely might remember reading is they say it might have continued for some time and then it petered out. There's no science to that. There's not, but that's sort of.
It's an interesting narrative. Yeah. I'm going to look at a bunch of this stuff after we get done, just because it's interesting, man. I mean, I'm fascinated by. When Mormonism came on the scene, or Unitarianism.
Mormonism's crazy, like the founder.
Yeah, but they follow some of these same threads that we're talking about, right? Yeah, like that they are one of the tribes. Is it that?
I think I haven't looked that much into him, but I have looked a little bit into the founder. What's his name?
Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
And then also from Joseph Smith and his brother, I forget his name, but then the next more prominent guy, that's when you go from cult to sect status, they say, is when your original leader dies and you continue. Was Brigham Young.
Oh, Brigham Young.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
They killed the Mormon militia and the Paiute natives massacred a wagon train that left from Harrison, Arkansas. Mountain Meadows. There's a great documentary about it on YouTube. It's the Mountain Meadows Massacre. And it's like it was in Utah. It's fascinating story. But like the Baker Fancher wagon train. Right. But like when I was just reading about Seventh-day Adventism, I was saying, well, this came on the scene around the same time as Mormonism. And Unitarianism was just a little bit before. And this is all really schisming out of the Second Great Awakening, if you want to get particular about it, in terms of movements, religious movements in America.
Yeah.
But that's fascinating because like I keep asking, like, well, what did they say about that? Or like how did you get any other odd questions from kids? Because I'm fascinated by what kids have to ask.
That is true, but no, that was the only one I got that was like that. Everything else, because frankly, I shouldn't say most, but well, it probably was most. Most of the kids didn't want to be there until especially if it was their first time. After their first time, because the camp was 2 weeks long. And you got to remember, they're coming from all over the United States and all over the world. So, I mean, and we're talking about roughly 80, 85 kids. So, I mean, it's not massive, but I mean, we got people there from all over the world. India, I keep saying India, Australia, New Zealand, UK, Netherlands, all over the United States. One from Africa, a couple from, anyway, I could go on and on. But so, no. Most of the kids, it took a while to warm up. They didn't want to be there, but we did so much sports and stuff with them that they quickly bonded to other people, and even if they hated the religion, they loved
being a camp.
Yeah, so they still.
I love being a church camp. Honestly, that was fun times.
Yeah, they still had to sit through sermons and stuff like that, but they got lots of experience with sports and camaraderie with other kids and exercising. Some of them never did. So there was good things about it, and almost every kid. I don't think I ever saw one that didn't want to come back. So
you said you did that 3 summers, 3 years?
3 years, and that I was actually like an administrator. And then after that, I got pulled away to do other things. So I would just come for one event after that, and I would run like our bonfire night because I play guitar. So I would set up everything, and I don't play much anymore. I mean, I don't.
Are we jamming after this?
Yeah, let's get it. Yeah. So I enjoyed that part of it. And I loved taking the kids out and looking at the stars at night and stuff like that. It was great to bond with them. And one kid, in fact, he was blown away because we were in a remote spot in Pennsylvania where you could actually see on a dark night the Milky Way. And
I was just watching Gettysburg. I'm doing a podcast about Civil War films right now, a series of podcasts, and they cut to that. They just show it in passing. I'm like, damn, it don't look like that around here.
Right.
I've seen it in the wilderness portion of the Buffalo. I was around nothing.
Exactly.
Walked out at like 2 a.m.
That's
to
where I've
pee.
seen it.
Yeah.
It's magical, and it's a shame that even most of the United States, you can't see it. And this kid came from a massive city in India and it had so much light pollution. He said, we really don't even see stars in the sky. Like you may see 1 or 2 at night. I'm talking about stars in general. Like, when you go out, even with all this light pollution.
Hey, it's the first star. I remember when I was a kid being at my grandparents in a farm in Hartman, Arkansas. And when the sun was setting, it's like, oh, the first star. I can't tell you how many times I was trying to spot where the first star is going to be.
Yeah, and that's the end of the story. But he was just like blown away by the Milky Way, which I think most people are the first time they see it. It's incredible.
I'd seen it before, but like as an adult, that it may have been the first time I seen it. I mean, it blew me away for sure.
Like in my opinion, it's worth it. Like if somebody wants to go see something big like the Grand Canyon, I would suggest you try and find a dark sky park and go look at the Milky Way before you do that, because I don't think hardly anything compares to truly seeing on a dark night with very little light pollution in the Milky Way. It's almost life changing, you know. Just to think about what's out there and where we came from and what is this place about, you know. And so it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you moved to Ohio. You at least did this camp for 3 years. You're going through their college. You're starting to.
Yep.
But you've been hit with a couple of things that maybe raised your eyebrow, but you're still moving through the process.
Yeah, and that's what really got me though was when I moved to Wadsworth. Okay, so when we first moved to Wadsworth for like the first 3 months, I didn't even know that they were building a building. Like we were meeting in a rented space that was nice, and they had actually renovated the inside, even though it was rented. It was like lots of custom wood and stuff. So when you went in there, it was like gorgeous. But about 3 months after we moved there, they built their headquarters on their own land that they bought, and we moved there. So, the church moved there. So I don't remember exactly how long after they built the headquarters, but they started building other buildings. And then where he built it, all around two sides are houses that were already there because it's a 100-acre plot. It's a big piece of land. And he being David Pack started buying up houses, as many as he could, because his dream is to have, you know, their own little community compound, you know, whatever you want to call it.
Joe Rogan wants to do that right now for comedians.
Does he do?
He's like,
hilarious.
he's like, I'm moving to Texas.
I've heard him talk about that.
He keeps joking about it. He's like, we're gonna get all of us, man. Joey Diaz. He's talking crazy shit. But I mean, he's mostly joking. But I wouldn't be surprised if he moved, and a bunch of people moved from New York and California after this.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know they are sick of the traffic and many other things in that area. I mean, for me, like I do want to move to a bigger city, but pollution, depending where you move, that's a big thing. Like, have you seen?
Man. It's so beautiful here.
Have you seen the pictures of like LA just from COVID? How the sky like totally cleared up because there's nobody.
Well, you mentioned India. Was it the Himalayas?
I didn't see that.
They can see the mountains for the first time. All sorts of stuff, stories like that, just cleared up.
And all the asthma and other problems we're not even aware of that it's causing with people's health from all
What
that
if
pollution.
COVID, how hard it's hitting people respiratorily speaking, was because of something like climate change?
Yeah, very could be. Yeah. Could be. So, so moved there. Eventually, moved on to the campus and lived in a house on the campus.
Did you have to pay
rent? Yeah, but it was.
But you were working for the church, and they paid you,
right? Okay. So I mean, you had to rent the house, and they didn't charge an exorbitant price. It wasn't like they didn't give it to you cheap, but they didn't tax you through the nose or anything like that. They were pretty honest about it. The bad thing about working for the church is, you know, you're gung-ho, and people who want to do that are gung-ho, and you're trying to sacrifice for God, right? And that's what they tell you too, is like they don't pay you equal to what you would make what we call out in the world. That's the terminology they use. So anything that's not in the church is out in the world, right? So like
secular.
Yeah, secular. There you go. So they don't pay equivalent pay. So you get paid a lot less, but that means, you know, your effort is going towards God's work, right? So they don't pay you minimum wage. I'm not trying to say it's like slave labor, but I'm trying to paint a picture that money is so crazy tight if you live by their rules that it's a big factor in keeping people staying. Because if you live by all the rules and you tithe more than what most people do, because there's other tithes in the Old Testament, you know, a lot of people don't even believe in tithing 10%, but then quite a few evangelical Christians believe in tithing 10%. But the Old Testament also talks about another 10%. So we would tithe roughly 20% of our salary, and then we would give stuff on top of that, and this was encouraged. You know, you had to do the 20%, like you just had to. But you know, when we would meet for the holy days, you're supposed to give, not donations, but you know, you're supposed to give offerings. That's the term, and that's above and beyond. You don't, your tithes, you just send in.
You know, this quick side story.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, my dad would be what you would describe a deacon.
Yes.
Like in either one of the churches we went to. Mm-hmm. And at both of them, he was the dude they had come up for the tithe and offering. And he like always had this verse that he read. It's like, pressed down, running together and shaking over.
Flowing
right?
over, yeah.
Yeah. Like I was just like, but man, I remember we went to his house for Father's Day and he like switched it up on the prayer over the meal. And I was like, never heard him say that.
Yeah.
Like it was weird. I was just like, dude, you say the same prayer like every time. You didn't even say anything. You didn't say the word nourish. He always says that word. I was just like,
another funny one. I want to get right back to this story, but I just gotta throw this. No. I'm not cutting you off. I'm just saying, just one tidbit back to just things that sort of don't make sense. The church that I attended with my wife, like when we first met in Fort Smith, I went to her Baptist church because I was raised here in Russellville, so I was taking college in Fort Smith. When I met her, I just went to her Baptist church, and I thought it was hilarious, and I pointed it out to her. She didn't think it was that big of a deal, but the Baptists, at least most of them, they don't believe you have to follow the Old Testament, right? It's done away with. Yet, no exaggeration, every single time their pastor spoke, which pretty much every Sunday, at the end of every single sermon, he would quote a specific verse from the Old Testament about blessings. And I just thought it was hilarious. Like, you say the Old Testament is done away with, it's just...
Do you know if all Baptists hold that belief or is it?
I won't say they do because technically there's multiple branches now. I mean, there's multiple.
Baptist.
There's more than we even know. I mean, you can look it up online. There's multiple, but the problem is a lot of the multiples are tiny. So the biggest ones, pretty much, yes. I think the biggest group is Southern Baptist Convention, right? Mm-hmm. And then I forget, there's like two more that are pretty large, but I think they all are along that same line. I mean, most of the evangelical Christians believe you don't have to follow the Old Testament. I mean, that's pretty much across the board. But anyway, back to the cult. So I was going to the college, learning a lot, but David Pack was constantly talking about new prophecies. And it was tough because, one, when you live on the campus and you're a young fella, you're asked to do everything. When people move in, you're asked to help. So and this is off the clock. So like, not only do I have to work a regular job 40 hours a week, but on top of that, I got to help shovel snow at all these people's houses. I got to help anytime there's anything that they just need furniture moved around in the building.
Could you say no?
Pretty much no. You could if it was like an extreme situation, like you're sick or like you had an excuse.
Did you try saying no?
I've said no a couple times, but it had to be extreme. Like if it was because I wanted to study, no. You know what I'm saying?
What would they just be like, look, Brock, you're going to do it.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. Yeah, they're very serious about that, especially the ministers. They don't want to lose their power. So, they find a way to talk to you without being super rude, but letting you know, like, you don't want to take it to another level. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like, they talk to you in a real serious tone.
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't want to go there with me, buddy. And you've seen, not you, but seen other people get in trouble doing certain things, and they use the same type of tone. So they insinuate that, like, you're going to get a serious talking to and your life is going to be in shambles if you don't, do whatever I tell you to do. But
yeah. So some intimidation.
Yeah, there's intimidation, but it's not always like that. And for the most part, a little bit of it's good because you're helping your neighbors out, you're helping people out. But whenever it's a small group, because it's only the young people that get asked to do all this stuff, it's very time-consuming and frustrating because it's nonstop. It's like every week, multiple days, you're doing stuff outside of work.
You and your wife also, or just you?
Mostly the men, but the women do get asked to do certain things sometimes, but not near as much as the men. It's mostly like physical type stuff, moving things, all kinds of stuff like that. But so it's just this combination of like, not only working a full-time job, but you got all this extracurricular stuff they ask you to do. And then you're I was trying to go to the college, which I had to study outside of work. So I got to fit that into that time frame too. And that's new material. And then I still want to cover some of the old material to make sure that it's correct. Very little time for that because David Pack's constantly teaching new prophecies, and you have to try and keep up every Sabbath to understand what he's talking about, because you're supposed to talk to it about everybody. Because what we do is we'd have a sermon, and then we'd all eat together. So you're supposed to talk with everybody about the sermon and like understanding it. And if you're not understanding it, there could be some issues.
Did they ever cue into like, based off what little I know about you, it's like you have an inquisitive mind. Like,
Yes.
you like your whole approach that got you into this was like, okay, I read this, very convincing. I'm
Yes.
trying to find something that would make me not be convinced. And if I do,
Exactly.
I'll come off this idea.
Absolutely.
Did they pick up that you were inquisitive in that way, that like you might have been questioning? Was that ever a point of contention?
Not spoken to me directly at all, no. And I think they understand that the sharper people will find something eventually, and that's partially why they keep everybody so busy. And that's partially why David Pack gives the sermons that he does, because he has a specific way of preaching when he's preaching prophecy. When he's just covering like old doctrines, which he pretty much stopped doing shortly after we got there. When he covered old doctrines, it would be, you could understand it. It'd be a lively sermon. It'd be exciting. It's just like we're talking now, like you understand. But when he talks about new prophecies, he purposefully delivers it in a very jumbled, confusing manner. And they're like 3 hours long, and you've got to sit down in a chair that long. So like you don't understand what he's saying while he's
Just
up
a
there.
passive listener.
Yeah, and you're expected to know it. So they tell everybody you need to listen to it again the Sabbath before. So you get in this mode where, like, say it's Saturday, you're listening to a 3-hour sermon that you may know like one thing that he said in the 3 hours. Everything else is just like, oh my, and you're taking lots of notes, but it's just so jumbled. It's like afterwards you got to work the Tetris pieces. So then the next Saturday, you're listening to it again and trying to arrange the Tetris pieces, and it's so long you can't get them all in place. But then that's that morning. So then you go to services and you get another 3-hour just Tetris jumble, and it goes on and on and on. And what's even worse was he started changing stuff he had just taught the week before.
Damn it, I hate it when I do
Oh
that.
my goodness. It was just a mind screw.
Dude, I've done that in jiu-jitsu before. I'm like, guys, I found out this shit I showed you a few weeks ago. It might be bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep.
Like, this defeats all that.
Yep.
I mean, it happens. But that's like, I'm real open-minded for that reason, because we err, we make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And we draw new interpretations based off receiving new knowledge.
That's something I've always done too, is I'm not afraid to say, I don't know, or,
I say that in class all the time, and my students are like, what the fuck? Like, soon I ask you something I've never thought about or I don't know the answer to. I'm like, let's see what Google says. Like, you should have Googled this before you asked me.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, how do you not know? You're a historian. I was like, you want me to know all the history?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm doing good to get through this U.S. History 1 class right now. All right? Do you think they just bestowed the knowledge upon me? Like, I'm still learning shit all the time.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I keep thinking about, like, this point, you're a few years in, 3 years in or something, like, is kind of the span we've been covering. You mentioned initially that, like, maybe there's some concern by your wife's parents.
Yeah.
How are your interactions with people outside of the cult, the church, when you're in there? Let's say year 3, like, are they discouraged, like non-believers or other Christians? Are you discouraged from interacting with those people, or they want you to witness to those people?
No, they don't. That's what's interesting about this particular cult, like the whole Worldwide Church of God, for the most part, all the splinters that came out. They don't believe in evangelizing. They believe that God calls you. So,
I've heard that a lot.
So they put out the material, and that's what your tithes go to, is producing the literature, the videos, all that kind of stuff. And they pump that stuff out on the web, and they even have TV shows with a few of these splinters on. We had a TV show for a little while, which this is petty, and I should have mentioned anything petty, but I just mentioned it's funny, because from the moment I saw David Pack, before I even joined the church, and his videos, I always hated his personality. Seeing him on his videos, it's just like, this guy. I mean, it wasn't like charlatan, but it was like very aggressive, very stern and strict, and like it was very strange. Like think of like I sort of think of like an old military father who doesn't believe in any joy or something like that. That's how it came across in the videos. Now he's a much more friendly person in person, but that's how he comes across in like his sermons and videos, stuff like that. I just thought I'd throw that out there. But
What was this guy's background? It's David Pack.
okay, I can tell you what. I haven't done the research myself. I can tell you from what everybody has told me. I've heard a lot, so I can tell you. But I've heard other people that have actually known him when he was young too tell me the same thing. So I can't promise you this is 100% accurate, but I'm pretty sure it is. Because I met lots of people, like I said, that actually he was their minister when they were a kid and stuff like that. So my understanding is, and it's actually in his autobiography that he has, 2 huge books. They're the biggest books he has. It just tells you a lot about the kind of person. They have a lot of literature, and some of them are pretty large, but there's 2 books for his autobiography, and they're like, each one is way bigger than the biggest book. Anyway, so he found Worldwide Church of God, Herbert W. Armstrong, when David Pack was really good at swimming. Like he was pretty much probably going to go professional. He was really good. He was really good in high school. I mean, stellar swimmer. And he's a big, tall guy. He's like 6'6". He's got the body for it, like Phelps, Mike Phelps. And he trained a lot. I mean, it didn't come naturally. He just did it. So he was a really good swimmer. And he was thinking about going to college for swimming, but then he found Worldwide Church of God, sort of got sold on that, and he sort of did what I did. He moved to Pasadena, California. Remember, Worldwide Church of God was a way bigger church than Restored Church of God. Big.
So, and just to clarify, like you have Seventh-day Adventist, then Worldwide, and then what you joined. Is that the flow of the splinters?
They would say that they didn't come from Seventh-day Adventists. In fact, they have literature that traces their history back to a group before Seventh-day Adventists. I can't remember the guy's name, but they trace a guy that came over. And I wish I remember that part, but there's a guy that had a group before Seventh-day Adventists, which Seventh-day Adventists supposedly came out of. And that guy, they supposedly trace his roots all the way back to the apostles. That's what they claim.
Yeah.
And they go through a little more history than, they actually jump through a little bit, but I'm not a historian and I didn't proof it, or anything. But
yeah. I'm fascinated to go look into this guy after we wrap this up.
I'll try and look up the name for you. I want to say one of his names is Peter.
Well, I'm this David Pack guy.
Oh,
so
yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah,
talking
sure,
about.
sure.
He's still around.
Yeah, he is. So something funny about that in a minute. But so he went to Worldwide. He went to their college. He became a minister right out of their college, and that was like sort of his story. He became a minister, and he went back to Northeast Ohio, and he mainly ministered congregations in Northeast Ohio and New York, because he transferred to New York for a while, and like biggest congregations he managed was like 11,000 people.
Wow.
But he would have 11,000 at one site. So like sometimes he would travel around to multiple to speak and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, he was a minister for almost his whole life, working with lots of people and believing what they preach and all that kind of stuff. That's what I've been told. That's what other people have told me. That's what he writes about in his books. Again,
and they just wanted to do his own organization one day, I guess.
No. Herbert Armstrong died.
Okay.
Okay, and so Herbert Armstrong died, and on his deathbed, he named his successor, Joseph Tkach, and Tkach, very shortly after Mr. Armstrong died, started changing the doctrines that Worldwide Church of God teach, and just like anything else, right? How does I'm not saying this is awful, but people say how do people kill Jews in the Holocaust? It's like one step at a time. It's like get somebody to do something small that's wrong, and then something else that's wrong. It's just incremental steps, right? So same thing. Tkach started to change one little small doctrine here, small doctrine there, a little bit later, maybe a little bit bigger doctrine, and eventually the church that he kept going, because this took a while. But when he first started changing stuff, people just split off big time. So when it's like pretty much the second change he made, that's when splinters just went boom. And then splinters splintered.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting.
So, but just to trace to Koch, like I forget what they're called now, Universal or something. But
Universal Life Church.
they went completely opposite, like in doctrine. So he literally changed like not just a few things, he changed like everything. Like they are basically completely evangelical Christian, like Baptist, basically, which is diametrically opposed to Worldwide Church of God teaching. So like he just took it the full path, and they still have quite a few people last I heard. But so yeah, the splinters kept breaking off because people would do the same thing. You know, whenever Takach changed something, they say, "Oh, that's not right." So people would split off. You got to know some of those people were megalomaniacs. Some might have been not. Some might have been truthful. You know, but you get that mix of people, and then they would start studying themselves, and they start thinking highly of themselves because they're a leader, and they start thinking God is showing them things. So then they make a change eventually. And you got some people that stay with them because they're like, I believe what he's saying and it makes sense. And other people that are stuck like, no, whatever Worldwide Church of God taught is what I'm following. So then they would splinter off. And that's just how it got into thousands of groups. So
fascinating.
Yeah, it's wild how many groups there are just from that one church that started.
And yeah, so in this David Pack guy, like did he just decide he wanted to start his own organization?
He went with a few at first. So he went to, I can't remember if Global was the first one he went to, but I thought he went to two, and like one group and then went to another group, because this is what he claims, and I sort of believe him on it, but who cares? He claims that he never wanted to be like the actual head of any church, and that's why he followed others for the first like two jumps. But what he claims is like when he got to the second one at Global, they started changing some doctrines that he felt firm about, and he kept preaching them the way Worldwide taught him. And they were like, you got to change this. And he kept preaching, and he has tapes of his old sermons that he actually preached to them, and he tells everybody to go listen to them to prove like that he stayed fast to the truth, how it was taught, right? And eventually, I don't know why they didn't fire him like right away, but I guess he had such a pull with his congregations, they kept trying to work with him, and eventually they just fired him. So when he got fired for teaching the truth and holding fast to what Worldwide taught, he had enough followers that he decided to start the Restored Church of God that held fast to the truth that the Worldwide Church of God taught. And to them, they wouldn't say it started with the Worldwide Church of God, because you got to remember, they claim that the Worldwide Church of God's roots even trace all the way back to the apostles. So even though I keep mentioning Worldwide Church of God, what they really claim is that they're holding fast to the truth all the way back, to the apostles. Like it's the chain that they trace from them all the way through Worldwide, and then eventually through Restored Church of God, which he's changed stuff now too. So he's changed quite a bit, and that's what actually started to get me to leave, and not just because he was changing it, but that's when I started to like awaken a little bit. So
when that process started to take place, when you started to kind of, did you just start planning a way out? Did you go talk to leadership? Like, what was that process like?
Well, it was a long time, because at first his sermons, like I said, were very confusing. So at first I started telling ministry, which by the way, they tried to make me a minister and I wouldn't accept. It's a longer story than that, but I went to the school, and I was actually, there's like two steps. It's like you go to the school, and then if they actually want you to be a minister, you can be a minister. They don't technically ordain you, but they name you a ministerial assistant. And that's like your training period to find out if you're really going to be a minister or not. So you tutelage under another minister, that kind of stuff, which, shocking enough to me, I was really surprised. Maybe this isn't a bad thing. Maybe it's not. But to me, I thought it was ridiculous. There was very, very little training involved with actually being a ministerial assistant. I thought it was going to be like the college times 10, and all I did was go along for a ride with another minister when he visited a few people, and like afterwards, he hardly even explained anything. Now, it could have just been that minister too. And I did go with a few other ministers too, so it wasn't just that one. But the point is that training was very lacking. But so to answer your question, Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Well, I was just like, when you started you're going through this minister training. You're
Yeah.
starting to ask some questions. Dude's sermons are super confusing for you.
Yeah.
You're moving, it seems like, at the pace of light, and you're starting to get new information,
Exactly.
new prophecies.
I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I didn't feel stressed, but information-wise, I was overwhelmed. So I was ministerial assistant, and then, like, basically, now, there could be multiple reasons, but basically, at a time period, I was a ministerial assistant for quite a while, and then they said, you're not going to be a minister for right now. Personally, I think that was mostly financial reasons, because they were losing quite a bit of people. And the only thing that they told me specifically was like I needed more growth, which could have been very true. You know, everybody needs more growth at the same time, though, right? And that was a little devastating, a little bit, but not really, because I was a little overwhelmed and everything too. But fast forward about a year from that time, and I was very close to leaving, and they tried to actually make me a minister, and I said no.
Did you feel like that? Were your feelings hurt or anything that they passed over you before?
No, it wasn't because of that. It was it wasn't because my feelings were hurt. It was because I saw the way that they were ordaining people, not necessarily everybody, but the reason that it seemed to me that they were trying to make me a minister was, frankly, and they didn't explain this at all to me. I'm just putting two and two together, and I've been there for a long time. I've worked in almost every department in that.
How many years is it into the game at this point?
This was about 5.
Okay.
And when I worked there, I worked in a lot of the departments. They have many departments because they have a like a headquarters building where there's many departments, and then they have a separate building that's a mail building where they produce all their literature and stuff with nice printers and stuff like that. And they have another building where they produce all their videos and stuff, which is actually really good content. I mean, not the content itself, but I mean quality is what I meant to say. They have, because it's really up to one guy. They pulled in one guy who happened to have a lot of experience, and he's really good at what he does. And only 3 of them produce the videos, and they're quality-wise incredible quality. But anyway. They have like a church administration department. They have an IT department. They have an executive department and multiple departments. And I've worked in many of them. So I saw the inside out, how a lot of things work. And frankly, what it seemed to me was that the reason they didn't ordain me the first time was likely mostly because of funds, but also maybe because I needed to grow more. But whenever they wanted to ordain me again, the reason that I'm almost 100% sure it was just because they were trying to get me to stay. Because Whitney, I had told Whitney, that my wife, that I wanted to have a child, but it was up to her, you know, because for a while she wasn't sure if she wanted to have a child. And I wasn't going to pressure her. I said, just letting you know, I want to have a child, but if you don't want to have one, that's fine. But just think about it, because if you do, I want to have one as soon as possible. So that's sort of what got us on the wheels, because money was very tight. You know, you're giving them all your funds. There's no savings hardly at all. You're working for them. It's just there's almost no way out. I mean, the only way out is if you leave, you're going to have to go live with family or something for a temporary period.
What year is this? You went in 11, so is this like 2016?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Wow. So you really haven't, like, this isn't that far removed.
16, and then, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, we've only been out like maybe a little over 2 years.
What's it been like since you've been out? Like, was there major adjustments? Did you have to go live with family?
Yeah, temporarily, we absolutely did. Because we followed everything we were supposed to do, which means we had no money. We had nothing.
Were your families understanding and like
her parents are awesome. Whitney's parents, I mean, everybody has their flaws, but her parents, let me just tell you let me give you a little anecdote. When I first met my wife, she introduced me to her parents, I don't mean this as a slight toward my parents, because my parents are fine parents, but just take this as what it is. When I first met her parents and spent an afternoon with them, and then a second afternoon, I actually told Whitney, I said, wow, this is what a family's like. Like, they're wonderful people. So, and that holds true to today. When we were in the cult, we had a lot of arguments because they're firm Baptist believers, and I had to basically at a point I had to get real serious with them and say, look, we have to just not talk about religion. We love each other, right? And we're fighting all the time. And they agreed, and we got along ever since. But yeah, we stayed with them for like 3 months just to get on our feet and everything. And I got a job, and then we moved out after 3 months. And yeah, it was tough. I mean, and this was the thing is, some people don't have family like that. Some people's family hate them. And that's my point is like, I hope if anybody's listening, you'll have a little more compassion for somebody who you know is in a cult, because even though the person in the cult, if they realize it's wrong, they should just leave, and just, even if they have to live in a dump, do whatever you got to do. But at the same time, that is one of the things that keeps people in long, especially if they're in a cult where they live, on the area, because their money's gone. Like, what are you going to do? And it's just tough, especially when you're accustomed to living a certain lifestyle, not like rich and fancy, but if you're going to have to go live in like the projects, because you can't afford anything more than like $100 a month rent, $150, it's life changing. So we were very lucky in that sense that her parents were wonderful, took us in for a little while, we'd get on our feet and we could get back out, and we're on our own now. And that was hard, but mostly since I've been out, it's been absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, dude, I like, honestly, I just had this thought, but I think you could like turn this into a book or something.
That's what people want me to do.
Like, this is like, I really wanted you to come on and tell your story, but I also didn't want to like throw you on Front Street. Like, that's why I was trying to fill you out in the beginning of like, do we really want to call this a cult? Like, type of a thing. Because I didn't want to, like, I didn't know if we were going to get, because just talking with mutual friends we have, they universally refer to you as the Seventh-day Adventist. I'm just like, so that's why I was reading all about, but two, I was reading about groups that hold the Sabbath also, right? And have been fascinated. Like I said, I mean, just in my passing interest in that, I'm like, this shit's on Saturday. Like, just like we were talking earlier, but this is an amazing story. And some people is fascinating to me that would be in your, did you see people inside of there that just never questioned?
Oh, yes. In fact, it's sad to say, and I hate to generalize, but I'd say the vast majority of people that attended were not very sharp. Meaning like well below average IQ. There were some people, very few, that were very sharp.
Like lawyers and stuff like that?
Oh, there was PhD law doctor, and there was a medical doctor that actually ran, like he was about to run multiple hospitals in Arizona, like big time. And I mean, that's just two. There's multiple professional type people with professional degrees that not just that had lots of experience. So I don't want to generalize and say, only dunces can be sucked in, because that's not true at all.
That's what blew my mind about the Branch Davidians in Waco, is the number of intellectuals that were in the compound.
Yes. I would say the majority, again, were not at RCG, but that still doesn't mean that much, because there were quite intelligent people there. Well,
like yourself. Like, dude, you're a bright guy. Yeah. You're a great speaker. You haven't been like him hawing around this whole time. I'm always saying and shit, right? But like you're articulate as fuck.
I spoke a lot. I gave a lot of speeches, and just practice makes perfect. And they help you weed that stuff out. So I'm thankful for that. I mean, I took a speech class in college, but they had some speaking classes too that I took, and
the Scientologists that I've talked to, it's like the big hook for them is that they provide you with so many things that help you succeed in life.
Yes,
like
yes.
Skills, life skills.
Yes. So that's what I actually wanted to mention. I'm glad you brought that up. Everybody likes to talk about would I redo it, things that have happened in the past, would you redo it if you could, not go there or whatever. I mean, probably, but at the same time, there were so many good things I took away from it. There really was. It taught me so much. It increased my maturity level. Big time. There's so many structured things that they do, speaking classes, dances. You can learn how to formal dance. That sounds like a small thing, but it's just so many aspects of life that you don't hardly get anywhere else that you can get in this cult. And it almost like cultures you. Mm-hmm. Now there's bad things to that too, but the way I sort of look at it is I sort of see it as my military training in a way, like boot camp. Like, it was very tough.
You got a certain set of skills now.
Yeah.
Like, and Well, I've been fascinated to hear people like, I mean, there's a famous skateboarder named Christian Hosoi. He's the guy who came up with the Christ Air.
Oh, I know the Christ Air. Yeah, yeah.
So, hold on. But he got super addicted to drugs, ends up becoming a evangelical Christian.
Oh, okay.
Gets in a youth pastor type role and changes tons of people's lives and stuff, right? So it's like, for some, I guess it comes down to subjective reality. For some people, it's a great thing.
Yes.
Right.
Religion in general, yes. The cults like I was into, I don't know, because it was a lot of browbeating, a lot of negative focus in the sermons themselves, not in the everyday life and in the meetings we got together and the holy days when we kept. Those were fun and wonderful, but the teachings themselves were pretty negative. I'd say probably half of them. So from that cult perspective, I don't wish it upon anybody, and I wish they wouldn't have to go through that, because it just gives you a different outlook on life and looking at people very judgmentally. But like evangelical Christians and stuff like that, if there's a lot of good to that, like you're saying. I mean, especially if you boil it down and you don't dig too much into certain teachings of the Bible, and the groups that just like generalize and are like, we're supposed to love people, and be Christ-like, and they just keep those general principles. That's wonderful.
One of the greatest guys I know in the whole world's like that. He's a youth pastor. Yeah. And like, we don't talk about religion at all, but I'll tell you straight up, dude, like when my wife's grandma was dying, I called that dude. When my dad had a heart attack, I called that dude, and I was like, look, man, I don't really believe this stuff, but I know you do. And I was like, I'm struggling with this, and I just, say a prayer for me. Yeah. And I think there's some power in that, right? And I would not quantify myself as a believer in those things to a great extent, but there's a bunch of great jokes about thoughts and prayers and whatnot. Are you still a believer in any sense? Like, do you attend church? Like, where are you at with all this on the other side?
Sure. No. And it took me a while to not, because actually we started attending when we first, broke out of the cult. We started attending a Methodist church, and it took me a while, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to keep studying just like I did before and prove what I believe. So in the meantime, I was just going to go to church just until I understood what I really believed. And it took 3 or 4 months, but I had quite a bit of time and I did a lot of study. And for me, I came to the conclusion, absolutely not. As far as Christianity goes, no, I'm not a believer whatsoever. I don't know if I'd say I'm an atheist.
Agnostic is how I do.
Right. But yes, exactly. I was going to say agnostic, but it's like more vague, because I don't necessarily even believe there's any type of God like the God of the Bible. Like, I wouldn't necessarily completely rule it out, but I don't think there is. But who knows what else there might be?
Like maybe ancient aliens.
Maybe, but I'm saying like
Zachariah Stitch.
Exactly. Things are so complicated. The Big Bang, what was before the Big Bang, string theory, there's multiple universes, and this is all like still infancy and understanding. But my point is, like, there's so much we don't understand, as you know, and to say adamantly, like, I'm an atheist sounds pretty crazy to me.
It is crazy. I think that's too. Also, I don't agree with being a skeptic.
Okay. Right?
Like, I like a healthy dose of skepticism, but like when you work just from that point, it can be positive. And having, I'm real open-minded. Yeah. It's like, no, you need to see what all 3 of those stories say and think critically about it.
Sure.
Right. Like, but it's so easy. Like, I'll follow some skeptics. Like Michael Shermer is a skeptic I follow. And it's like, that dude will argue just to argue that something's not. Yeah. And he's been caught doing it. Can't stand that. Against Graham Hancock, who I have all of his books up there.
I can't stand that.
Yeah. And he pretty much on Joe Rogan's podcast had to be like, all right, look, maybe human gatherers are capable more than we thought. All right, there you go. It's like, yeah, dude, it's not that debased of an argument. It's like, look at Göbekli Tepe over there. Like,
yeah, that's impressive.
So, yeah. Yeah. Well, man, you have an incredible story. And two, I like that you have this kind of learning based approach. We still don't. I joke with everybody. I'm like, hey, we still haven't figured it out, but if you figure it out, you can let me know.
You got it, brother.
All right,
you got it.
So, well, dude, I appreciate you coming on and telling your story, man. It's been a pleasure. And
Thanks for having me.
It's been great content, dude.
I enjoyed it.
I'm looking forward to getting it uploaded, bro.
Absolutely,
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
I'm getting some new a boom. I have one. I got to get another one before the guests. I have this awesome hydraulic boom arm that's like it's money. But I got to get one for you too before I can't. You can't have this thing.
I'll have to come back to experience it.
Yeah. Well, right on, bro. Well,
Maybe I can talk about computer science someday.
Hey, dude, if you want to, yeah, I'd be down. Because man, that's something that shit they might not even have arts and humanities teachers in 20 years. You might be the future.
Wow. I know it's sort of creeping into a lot of
dude, I read an
disciplines.
article today that was arguing to get rid of general education. And I work at a community college, and that's all we got. Like, I was like,
no,
guys.
Yeah.
But they were just like, but they were arguing for 4-year institutions. They're like, you come here, you pay half your degree almost for this stuff. And it's like, basically they're like, people stop bitching about part of this college stuff if it's more about specialization. And they were like doing figures on how much money you lose out on by having to take introduction to music when you're going to be a nuclear engineer.
Yep.
And I get being cultured, but damn, dude, you cultured yourself like in all these other areas without going to college too. But but computer science, man, we are moving at such a fast rate. Like when more people die that were our age when the internet was invented, that's all there's going to be. Like, I still know plenty of people that they can't teach online because they're just too technologically inept, and they're 62 years old. And they don't care. Like, I work with a guy, and he's like, I don't know if I'm going to come back because he doesn't want to teach online. Like, I mean, and it's like, because he's, and really, honestly, I wouldn't want to learn online from him either. I'd want to do this.
Sure.
So, anyway. But best of luck to you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, right on, bro.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks again, man. What a great story, man. I didn't know how that would go,